get higher. If your garden
Do we have a video for this or no? No? All right, perfect. All right, City Council study session for Thursday, thank you, Thursday, March 28th, 2024, will come to order. Please call the roll. Perfect timing.
Mayor Beck,
Here?
Vice Mayor Edwards,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Crawford,
Here.
Councilmember Finn,
Here.
Councilmember Fontana,
Here.
Councilmember Dunn,
Here.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Present.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. With that, we will pass this to staff for the study session for today. So, Mr. Darn.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, I've worked in government for almost 25 years, and one of the things I've learned about the way government is run is it really is a three-legged stool. And the three legs of that stool are policy, operations, and budget. And so this afternoon, we're going to talk about the budget for the city of Peoria in fiscal year 2025. And with that budget, you will in part be setting your policy priorities, but you'll also be telling staff what we need to be doing over the course and what we need to be spending our money over the course of the following fiscal year to effectuate your priorities. So what you're going to see this afternoon is our attempt to adjust our budget to present to you our proposed budget based upon the priorities that you have set for us over the past several years. But I also want to mention that our budget certainly is based upon the priorities that you've set for us around economic development, water security, and public safety. But there are other factors that have gone into the establishment of the budget, and some of these are worth noting. In particular, we have a situation where our state legislature has revoked our residential rental sales tax. That certainly caused us to make some adjustments in our proposed budget. We have inflation and interest rates skyrocketing, and that has been and will continue to be reflected in our budget. And on top of that, we're experiencing a slowdown in our sales tax revenue. And the thing that we're very fortunate here at Peoria is that we have a very skilled staff who have done a fantastic job of forecasting our financial future for the city of Peoria. And whereas there are other cities throughout the valley that are really having to scramble and make really tough decisions about their fiscal year 25 budget, because of the conservative nature of our projections that have been set forth by our staff, we are in a much better place than most of our sister cities throughout the valley, and even the state for that matter, in the projections that they have made in the past that didn't come to be. So I want to commend them for the work that they have done, and you're going to hear some more of that this afternoon before we begin. But speaking of other cities, we are in a competitive situation with them when it comes to staffing. So we, like other cities, are trying to make sure that we're retaining the best and the brightest to help us achieve our important objectives here with the city. So in the proposal that you see today, we are suggesting adjustments to the pay for our non-represented employees to reflect the competitiveness that we continue to strive for as it relates to other cities. And then with all of that, what you'll see is that we are proposing an overall increase in our budget of less than 5%. But when you consider that inflation for last year was at about 3.4 to 4%, that does not represent much of an increase if you take that into consideration. So I think we should get into that a little more closely. Peter Christensen's going to help us do that, talk about the state of our economy and our budget and some forecasts. But I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Burke, Deputy City Manager, to kind of talk us through the agenda for this afternoon, because we have 3 shifts that we're going to be going through as we try to divvy up the responsibility for presenting to you our budget and asking any questions along the way. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to kind of take us through the agenda.
Can I say one thing? I'm really disappointed that there's only 2 bow ties in the room now.
Oh, don't say that.
You know, I really, when I walked in and I saw Travis with a bow tie, I'm not going to keep. I got a little giddy. I thought, Mike, you actually might show up with a bow tie. I'm just saying. You know?
That's right.
With that, maybe the next study session we could actually pull that off. That would be a great photo. I'm sure the residents would love that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you, City Manager Darwin. I'm filling in this particular part for our CFO, Sean Kindle, who's got a terrible case of laryngitis, and every time we ask him to start talking, it turns into a coughing fit. So didn't want to put him through the ringer on that on his first time through. So just know that our CFO is firmly behind the budget that's in front of you today. So we have some key points about the budget is it's balanced. It makes substantial progress on council priorities. It does so with no tax increases. It weathers inflation, and it's consistent with the principles of sound financial management. From a scheduling standpoint, we are today at the council budget study sessions. What happens here is we review the budget, take your input, and put together what's known as a tentative budget that we bring back for your adoption in May. So this is the next step. Our agenda today will be certainly a high-level overview of the whole budget and the conditions that went into putting this together. Then we will get into some deeper detail on the capital improvement program and move on to program summary. And we've divided the budget into 4 categories: administration, development, operations, and public safety. And we'll have presentations in each of those areas. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to our Deputy Finance Director and Budget Manager, or Budget Supervisor, whatever your title is. Peter Christensen.
Peter, before you get started, I just want to point out that the easels that you see here in front of you today, and so what the reason for the easels is that we have done our best to encapsulate and to recommend to you all the adjustments that we would like to make, the adds that we would like to make and recommend in the fiscal year 25 budget, and that'll be the lion's share of what you hear this afternoon, or what we suggesting being added to our already existing budget. But we fully understand that there may be things that you'd like for us to go back to the drawing board and to add to our recommendations for your full consideration when this is brought to you formally for your consideration and for your vote. So what you see there are a few adds that have come to us, primarily from the city attorney's office, post our preparing the budget books that you have today. So we already have a growing list. You think of it as a tip jar that already has money in it. So this is the beginnings of ads, but we will do our best to, during the course of this conversation, if we hear something that we'd like to add, we will add it to the list, or something you want us to take off, we'll consider taking off, we'll consider taking it off. But remember, this is not an opportunity to vote. This is an opportunity for you to give feedback, for us to go back to the drawing board, and then to formally present to you the budget for your consideration and your vote. So we will hold time at the very end of today's conversation for you to add things that you've heard, so don't feel like you need to do it as we go through the presentations. There will be time at the end if you want to add something or delete something. We can have that conversation at the end. So with that, I'll turn it over to Peter to give us the budget overview. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Darwin. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Good to be here with you today, doing my favorite thing, budgeting, of course. I did want to recognize before I get started that there is a ton of effort that goes into that. It's not just us in the budget office doing this. We work closely with all the directors and their analysts and staff, and I know they feel like it never ends, the budget never ends, and in some ways that's true. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them for all their work in putting this together. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief financial-based overview of what's in the budget and the revenues what we're seeing in terms of revenues that helps us figure out how much we have to spend. First is our financial policies that Mr. Darwin alluded to. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it goes without saying that as we start to put together the budget, we always have this in mind, our council adopted financial policies. Two of the key ones that I would just point out is that we do not use any one-time revenues to fund ongoing operations. That's a best practice in public budgeting, and one that we've always abided by. And then we do maintain strong reserves and only use those as a short-term solution. Really, we haven't used those in over a decade. So, and the rating agencies certainly recognize that, and it's reflected in our AAA bond ratings. Okay, so the budget we have before you tonight totals $995 million. That's a little less than 5% increase over last year. It's made up of four major categories, the largest being the operating budget, which is $459 million, and that's 46% of the total. The operating budget has increased by about 10% over the last year, and I will get into some of the major reasons for that in a couple of minutes. The next biggest portion is the capital budget at $428 million, or 43%. That's grown by just 4% over the previous year. Then we have debt service at $51.5 million and 5.2% of the total. We continue to manage our debt in a very responsible manner, consistent with state statutes and our own financial policies on the use of debt. And then finally, we have our contingency appropriation. Again, this is not allocated to any particular purpose. It's just budget authority that we need to get into the budget so that we can deal with unexpected opportunities or emergencies that comes up during the course of the fiscal year. So keying in a little bit on the general fund, which is our major operating fund. This chart just breaks down the proposed general fund operating budget into major functions. You can see here that 60% of the total almost is for public safety. Another major part of the general fund are the administrative services. They're all housed under the general fund, things like the city attorney's office, finance, HR, all those kinds of things. And we do charge out a portion of those costs across all the other operating funds in the city. And then about 25% of the general fund operating budget is made up of departments and services who recover at least a portion of their costs through various fees and charges. These are things like development services, parks and recreation, arts, culture, and library, and neighborhood and human services. Okay, so what's included in the budget? I'm going to talk first about expenditures, and then we'll get into some of the revenues. I mentioned that the operating budget for the entire city is increasing by about 10%. The operating budget is heavily made up of personnel costs. About half of the total operating budget citywide is personnel, and if you look at the general fund, it's even more. It's over 70%. So the budget includes compensation adjustments for all city employees. It includes the adopted MOUs for the represented groups that have COLAs and merits built into that, and then it also includes COLA and merit adjustments for the non-represented employees. So that makes up a big part of the increase. Another one this year is that we do have an 8.6% increase in our health insurance premiums for both the city and its employees. This is quite a bit bigger than we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years, but it is not unexpected and it's not a surprise. We've seen with the inflation we've seen across all other categories of spending, it was only a matter of time until it showed up in our health care costs. But I will say that our forecasts did account for this. This is actually less than we had originally forecasted, so that's good news. And we continue to be very competitive in the market with other cities and governments who have their own healthcare programs. Okay, then the supplemental additions. So these are supplemental requests that exceed department's base budgets. And these, for this year, it totals about $41.6 million. $30 million of that is one time, and then there's ongoing of $11.6 million, including 41 new positions, which we'll talk more about. Of those supplemental additions, we are seeing still a lot of that is inflation related. I added up about $7 million worth of inflationary increases, whether they're one-time or ongoing, that make up that $41 million. I will say that when we spoke to you back in November and again in January at the retreat, we told you how much financial capacity we had in the general fund and in the half-cent fund. We have allocated all that out in the general fund, both one-time and ongoing. We've saved some capacity in half-cent for future economic development purposes, but just want you to understand that we have basically used up what we told you we had available, especially in the general fund. Okay, I mentioned we're adding 41 FTEs with this FY25 proposed budget. You can see that the vast majority of those are in the public safety area. Of the 17 fire medical department additions, 15 of those are for the new fire station in northern Peoria that we've been planning for quite a while. And that's about to begin design and will be constructed in the next couple of years, but fire will begin hiring those bodies and getting them trained and ready for when that opens. Okay, so now shifting to revenues. I'm going to focus on the general fund. You've seen this chart before. I won't belabor it, but just want to remind you that almost 2/3 of our revenues in the general fund come from just 3 sources: our city sales tax, the state shared sales tax, and the state shared income tax. Excuse me, all revenues that are very volatile, meaning that they move up and down quickly with changes in the economy. And we've seen that benefit us in the last few years as the economy has been strong and our revenues have been growing a lot. I want to focus on those three major revenues for a minute. We are seeing changes from what we talked about a year ago when we were before you for the current year's budget. So when we look at city sales tax revenues, focus for a minute on the blue bars. Those are actual collections of local sales tax for the last 10 or so years. And what I'd call to your attention is that between FY14 and FY20, we saw average year-over-year growth of about 6%. That's good, that's steady, but then in the years after COVID, the last 3 years, we've seen average growth of 10% a year, which is really unprecedented and very healthy growth, which has helped us a lot. That is changing, as illustrated by this chart. This is the last 12 months worth of city sales tax collections. You can see that half of those have actually been negative compared to the prior year. We told you back in November that we were forecasting flat growth in sales tax for this current year, fiscal year 24. That's exactly what we're seeing. Through the first 7 months of data that we have, we're up about 1%. So right on track with what we expected. In terms of projections, which are the orange bars in 24, just like I said, that remains flat. And then for 25, that looks flat when you're looking at the chart, and that's because of what Mr. Darwin was talking about with regard to the residential rental that was eliminated by the legislature and takes effect in midway through FY25. So even though we're projecting modest increases in our sales tax revenues, it looks flat because of that, the elimination of that source of revenue. And I will say, piggybacking on what Mr. Darwin was talking about, there were cities out there that they either didn't believe that this was going to happen, or they thought that the state or the governor would somehow make those revenues whole. That has not happened, so they baked that expectation into their budgets, and now they're scrambling to figure that out. We always expected or presumed that that was just going to go away, and so we've largely been able to absorb it within our budget thanks to the revenue growth of the last few years and just our budgeting practices in general. State shared sales tax is a similar story. You see the kind of steady growth between FY14 and FY20 was about 4.5% a year on average, and then post-COVID it was actually 20% over the last 3 years, so really big growth in that revenue source. Some of that had to do with the census in 2020 and Peoria growing faster than some of our neighbors in the valley and across the state. In terms of the forecasted amounts for 24 and beyond, again, 24, we're forecasting it to be flat, even though we're seeing it up a few percentage points. Hopefully that will hold true and give us a little more one-time capacity the following year. And then for FY25 and beyond, we are projecting modest growth in state shared sales taxes also. Okay, and then finally, the most complicated of them all, which is urban revenue sharing or state shared income tax. These blue bars are what our actual collections, and then for 24 and 25, we actually already know what these are going to be because of the 2-year lag between when the state collects them and when they remit them to us. What I would point out here is that you see the big increase in 23. That's really just reflecting the strength of the economy and the income that individuals and corporations were generating during that time. FY24, you see a huge jump. That again is that economic growth that was happening 2 years ago, but it also reflects the shift in the distribution formula from the state to the cities from 15% to 18%, which was part of the flat tax law that went into effect a couple years ago, or that passed a couple years ago. For 25, you see it dropping by $10 million. That's because that's the flat tax going into effect in force, and so with the tax reduction comes lower tax revenues, and our revenues will be dropping by about $10 million. The real trick here is projecting out what these are going to be for the next 5 years. Again, and Henry alluded to this, the state vastly overestimated the impact, or underestimated, I suppose, the impact of the flat tax on its revenues. You've heard them, if you've read the news, talking about how they need to make cuts in their one-time budget for fiscal year '25. There are also cities out there that bought into the state's forecasts and just sort of used those as their own, and as a result, they are now facing similar problems. We never believed the state's estimates, honestly. I mean, if the orange charts you're seeing are what our revenues would look like if we did use the state's estimates. You can see they're $40 million plus. We never bought into that. We didn't think they really knew what that was going to be, so we set our base much lower in the mid $30 million. And thanks to that, we don't have any major problems. We don't need to cut. We don't need to make any severe adjustments. So those are the major revenues that drive the general fund, and what really determined how much we had to spend. When we told you back in November, we had $2 million ongoing to spend in the general fund, and then $50 million or so one time. So that's what that was based off. So those are my remarks, just a brief financial overview. I'm happy to take any questions on any of that.
Thank you, Mayor. Peter, great presentation. Just a couple quick questions about the overview. You talked about our bond rating, and I know that we have a AAA bond rating for our general obligation bonds. How often are those ratings reviewed and reassessed?
That's a good question, Councilmember Schaefer. They're only reviewed when we go to market with new debt. So I can't remember the last time we did it. Was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. We were thinking we were going to do a debt issue this spring, but because of spending trends, we don't think we need to. We may do one later in the year, but that's the time at which the rating agencies get involved and review our ratings.
We do have to check, if I could add, Mayor and Councilmember Schaefer, we do have to check in each year, though, with them and do some reporting requirements to make sure that we are staying within their projections for us as we went forward.
So Kevin, when we check in with them every year, do they update it, or do they keep it based upon the prior 2 year ago projection?
I've not seen them change the rating. It's more of just a kind of due diligence on their part.
Okay. Another question, Peter. Our contingency amount for FY25 is $56.1 million. In FY24, it was $78 million. FY23, it was $80 million. And FY22, it was $79.1 million. So let's say average at $80 million is what we put in contingency. So why in FY25 proposed budget is there a $20 million reduction from prior budgets?
It's a great question. I wondered if somebody would notice that. So thank you for doing that. What we found is when we increased that in the first place because we wanted to have a cushion there in case of a big economic development project. At the time, we were thinking of the improvements or the project at the sports complex. We thought we might have to add like a $40 million infusion in the mid-year for that parking garage, if you remember that whole conversation. So we had bumped it up 4 or 5 years ago, like you said. But what we're finding is that we're not using all of that, so we don't really have a reason to keep it up that high. So this year, for example, we had the $74 million or something that we budgeted. We've used about $30 million to date, so with a few months left in the fiscal year, we'll probably use $35 million of it and still have $40 million sitting there that we didn't need. That's okay, but we just thought, we don't need to have that big of a contingency, so we're going to bump it down a bit.
So Peter, just to confirm, the $56.1 million were fully funded on contingency, and the reason we reduced it is because that was excess that we didn't need in contingency. Is that correct, Peter?
That's correct, yeah.
That's good. Not right now, I got more later.
And keep in mind that contingency really it's not actual dollars, it's not allocated to anything, it's just budget authority or appropriation from the city council in case things come up and we need to use it. Things that aren't in the actual budget that eventually will be adopted.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. I think we're on to the capital budget. If you want to put, I think that's number 2 up there. So, good evening. or good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I know, it's only 2 o'clock. Mike Faust will be doing a majority of this presentation. However, I'm going to kick it off because there was a lot of discussion in last year's budget that I suspect could carry forward into FY25 regarding parks and maybe Paloma Park in particular. And while not one of the top 3 policy issues, want to make sure that we are discussing it, since it does get a lot of discussion in the community. In fact, we had a study session on park parity earlier in the year, and it was a topic that our youth liaisons took to DC and actually won a national competition at the National League of Cities. So I bring up the history mainly to discuss or to explain the path to the CIP for parks that is in front of you in 2025. So let me jump into the background there. So again, start at the center with the Paloma Park. Just as a background, we note that this is a community park of 85 acres that was dedicated in 2020 at a cost of $34 million. It has the amenities common to our community parks with lighted multi-use fields, baseball fields, pickleball courts, and then, fishing pond, dog parks, et cetera. So all key elements to a community park. The piece I really want to call out is in that bottom right-hand corner when you look at the community park parity, since we'll continue with that vernacular. Pioneer Park kind of represents a community park in the southern portion of the city, 85 acres dedicated in 2013. You get Rio Vista Community Park, more located in the central part of the city, a little bit smaller at 56 acres, but it has a recreation center. And that was dedicated in 2004. And then Paloma, as constructed, is a community park serving the north side at 85 acres, dedicated in 2020. So again, you can see based on those components, it checks the parity box. And I just bring that up because as we look forward into the financial
Mayor.
history, it
Mayor, I got a
has
quick question
some
on
questions related to that. So great. So the next part that I want to talk about is kind of the financial history that brought us to that point. And that can be a little bit more confusing because I've heard and seen comments about bonds being dedicated to Paloma Park, and that's not quite accurate. So I wanted to just kind of walk through how we got there. So in 2008, there was a bond election, and the ballot language specifically outlined that the money needed to be used to acquire, construct, improve, and equip recreation and ancillary facilities, trails, and bicycle routes. So this is the legal language of the ballot. Equally important, however, is there's a political promise made at the time of a ballot that says this is how we're going to spend that money, and that's usually captured in the publicity pamphlet. To that extent, that said, improvements include community and neighborhood parks, trails, and open space. So in neither of those cases does it say the money is dedicated to Paloma Park, but in both of those cases, Paloma Park is an eligible expense of that language. So whether it's the legal language or the political promise, the box is checked as being in compliance with those. Now, the total bond in the 2008 was $40 million. When the Paloma expansion was given the go-ahead for design, the cost estimate was between $20 and $25 million. And that worked perfectly because there was still $25 million in bond authority left. Now, you're probably asking, how do you have $25 million left? It was only a $40 million ballot question. But there was actually 2 other bond elections prior to 2008, one in 2005 and one in 2000. The composite of all 3 of those had a balance remaining of about $25 million. And it had the similar flexible language that allowed for a Paloma expansion to proceed. Unfortunately, when the actual design was completed, the cost estimate came in at $36 million. So we're now exceeding the money that was available. However, there is a way to expand that revenue source, and that is ask for more bond authority through another bond election. So to that extent, there was a bond committee that was chartered by the council. Councilmember Schaefer led it. Myself served as the staff liaison to that committee. Went through a pretty extensive review effort, brought forward to council in March of '22 two bond possibilities, one for public safety, one for parks, with a proposal of putting that on the November 22 election or 23. The council at that time said they were not interested in putting this on the November 22 election and would reconsider in 2023. Further, in the summer of 2022, as we continued to experience rapid inflationary costs that Mr. Darwin mentioned in his intro, we revisited the CIP in Paloma Park in particular, and the council put a pause on Paloma Park at that time. And so that brings us to the budget cycle of 2024, which, believe it or not, starts in October of '22. So your staff is sitting there looking at this project and saying, the project's on pause, there's insufficient money, and there's no election scheduled in the future. In that environment, staff really had no other option but to remove it from the FY24 CIP. And so that is what happened. And so I want to take that just a little bit further, because one of the key issues that drove to that underfunding also drove to some conversations about other things being pulled out of the CIP related to parks. And so I wanted to revisit the conversation regarding new neighborhood parks in the CIP. Once again, there was, I've heard conversations about, hey, these were defunded in the FY24 CIP. That's partly accurate, partly inaccurate, and wanted to kind of walk through that. So first and foremost, neighborhood parks that are in most new master plan communities being developed are an obligation of the developer. It's a contract the developer signs with the city that says, I will provide a neighborhood park in my development. Now, these parks at their expense. Now, that expense can be reimbursed through impact fees. And for those of you not familiar with an impact fee, it's a fee assessed on every new residential house or other structure building in that neighborhood or in that master plan community that pays a fee for parks that can then be reimbursed to the developer. Now, at the time of the CIP, there was an interest in supplementing the developer's investment with city funds. Now, I was not part of that conversation, so I can't speak to the rationale, but today the base requirement for a neighborhood park that the developer must require includes a lighted multipurpose field, a lighted ball court, whether that's basketball, pickleball, volleyball, there must be a lighted court. It includes a bathroom, ramadas, and a playground. So those 5 things must be in a neighborhood park, and they are the responsibility of the developer to provide. But if you look at this slide here, you'll see that, again, there were supplemental funds, and they were listed as future GO bonds, okay? So once again, given there was not and remains no election to enable future park general obligation bonds, the responsibility falls fully on the developer to provide that. Oops, pardon me, provide that. So these projects will continue to move forward, and they were removed from the CIP because they were the developer's responsibility. So let me say that again a little bit clearer. These are not in the CIP, however, they will go forward, they will occur. The city is simply not incurring debt to pay for something that the developer has a contractual legal obligation to pay for. And so back to the issue of future GO bonds, when we put this in the FY23 CIP, we were very clear, and there's a notation associated with each one of them that says, after FY23, this requires additional voter authorization for parks and recreations to proceed via general obligation bonds. And this is a note that really carried into some of the other items that came out of the FY24 CIP versus the 23. 3 of the new river project segments were in the FY23 budget, but you can see the entire funding was banking on a future general obligation bond. Pioneer Park, 8.1 of the 9.8 was counting on a future general obligation bond. Sunrise Mountain Park, the entire project. In fact, of the 35 projects listed in the FY23 CIP, 20 of them had this notation. And in terms of dollars, you have $141 million worth of park projects. 130 of that was based upon or expecting future general obligation bonds. So that might be good planning, but that isn't funded, all right? These projects, so when they say they were defunded, they were never funded to begin with. And so, again, since your staff was sitting here looking at no election on the horizon, the responsibility was to remove those. Now, there's still $25 million left in park authorization and bond authorization. And this is an interesting convergence of maybe a lesser-known portion of the work conducted by the bond committee and this balance. The bond committee identified $30 million in maintenance and refurbishment for existing parks. So that was part of that initial, or of that proposal that was brought forward. So you got $30 million in needs identified by the bond committee, $25 million in balance on the bond elements. And we heard pretty clearly from the majority direction last year was to take care of the existing parks before we're adding the new parks. And so, as such, staff has programmed most of the $25 million in bonds across maintenance projects in the CIP that is in front of you. So it's a long-winded explanation to tell you why the CIP in front of you looks a little different. And so you'll see one other key note there is, however, we can't do $25 million in 1 year. And I think Councilmember Schaefer asked me this question last year about, hey, can we do the $25 million? Yes, I just can't do it all in 1 year because secondary property tax, which generates the money, so the bond authority just says you have our permission, property taxes is how you actually raise the money to pay for it. That is already committed to other capital projects, whether they be streets related, facilities related, drainage related. So there's really only capacity for about $3 to $5 million a year. So again, the CIP that you will see in front of you is taking those $3 to $5 million increments and putting them towards the maintenance of existing parks, whether it's facility refurbishment, court renovation, playground improvements, or the grounds refresh program. So this, again, is the idea of trying to ensure parity between existing parks and new parks. So I apologize for the long-winded explanation, but knew you were going to recognize some changes in the CIP and wanted to explain how we got there before we jumped into the 3 council policy priorities. All right, with that, I'll stop, take questions, and then we'll pass it on to Mike to do the lion's share of the CIP.
So I'll just, actually, do you want to ask a question first? Go ahead and ask your question first. And then.
You read the confused look on my face, so I'll
Yeah.
go ahead and ask it. I thought I heard you say that we can't spend $25 million in 1 year. Is that correct?
You don't, okay, let me quantify that a little bit clearer.
Sure.
Is that we did not have capacity to add a $25 million project associated with secondary property tax in 1 year.
So my confusion is, I guess maybe even for the public, for those of you that are, you know, feverishly following along at home. 2025 shows $25.5 million to be spent, so that I was a little bit confused on that.
Right, so, I
Well, hang
mean,
on a second, let me make sure that I'm on the same page, because I saw the confused look on your face. I want to make sure I'm not making a fool of myself here. So if I look at the total for 2025 in Parks and Rec, I see $25.5 million?
as far as the
That's-
FY25 CIP?
That is correct.
Yes, but not all of that.
Is one project.
All of that is bond dollars.
Okay.
Okay, so if you'll, well,
So
it
that-
doesn't
that-
show it in the summary page, but if you.
That bond money is going to be spread out, right? Just help people understand the difference.
Let me,
Yes, sir.
because I think I know where you're going with this is, can you kind of recap on how how we would actually use this balance? Because we've obviously had a lot of meetings over the course of the year. We did the parks parity for a reason. We went through this process. What is your thought on how we would actually use the $20 million to $25 million in the available bonds money that's
Right.
available?
So staff's approach to the $25 million was to spread it over these maintenance line items that are in the capital improvement program, the 4 that are on the screen there, and to spread them across multiple years. And the reason that we spread it across multiple years, again, was this idea of the secondary property tax. We've been very religious about holding that property tax rate constant and not increasing it. As such, it only generates so much money in any given year. So that money is used not just for parks and recreations, but it's used for streets projects, it's used for drainage projects, it's used for facility projects. And so when you look at how much money the property tax will generate and the commitments we've already made in some of those other projects, not just in parks and recreation, we only had capacity to do about $3 to $5 million a year. And so that's why we spread it across the time period. Does that help at all?
More of an equitable spread across those levels.
I got it. Yep, thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilor Schaefer?
Thanks, Mayor. So, Kevin, can I request a list of all those projects that make up the 25 million over the next 10 years in the CIP, since we can only spend 3 to 4 million a year?
You bet.
And then, Kevin, can you go back to slide number 1 that had the park parity? I apologize for interrupting earlier.
That's what I get. for
Yes, right there.
putting it
Thanks,
in.
Kevin. I appreciate the Parks Department of doing the park parity across the city. I think there's a major component missing on this. Yes, you have acreage, yes, you have parks listed, but when they did the park parity, they had a list of amenities, and there was a significant difference of amenities across the different districts and everything. So I would ask that you add the number of amenities to this slide.
Okay.
And then, Kevin, thank you for taking us through the summary of the 25 million. I just want to confirm, so 25 million was allocated in the FY '23 CIP for Paloma Park expansion, correct?
It was, yeah.
And you can confirm that there's $0 for Paloma Park expansion in our current CIP, FY '24, and then what's sitting in front of us today for FY '25, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay. Can I make a recommendation to add something to our easel for Paloma Park funding at this point? Okay, I would like to, on behalf of the Mesquite District, I know that Paloma Park's important, so I would request that we add Paloma Park expansion as part of a CIP line item.
As long as it doesn't include water, I think we're good.
How much would you like to allocate to that, Councilmember Schaefer?
Well, thanks for asking, Henry. I'm going to ask for the full 25 million, but I do know that that's not year one, as we just discussed.
So it would be helpful for us to know, because it's such a large dollar amount, where would you prefer that we get that money? What should we cut from our budget? Because it's a large amount. So where would you suggest we cut our budget to come up with that $25 million?
Another great question. I got 800 pages of budget and capital projects in front of me. I would ask our staff our experts to go back and take a look and make a recommendation.
So, we're talking, so could you give us an idea of what areas you'd like first? Because you'd like to cut public safety, water security, economic development, which area would you like us to look at to cover that $25 million?
I'll give you the 25 million. There's, in the CIP, there's 30 million for the purchase of the airport land. I think it's 4.5 year one and then 2.5 every single year over the next 10 years. There's 30 million, so that would make up the difference.
Okay, so that's where you'd like us to, so when we present this back to council, you would like for us to propose an option of replacing that cost with the Paloma Park
Yes, sir.
expansion? Okay. We can do that.
Thanks, Henry.
Do you have airport land being purchased in here?
We do have some airport land being purchased.
Just making sure. Yeah.
All right. With that, we will move on to, sorry, Mike, I'm going to have to go through each one of these clicks before I get you back there. We will move on to the balance of the CIP. Oops, two more clicks.
All right. Mayor, Council, I drew the short straw and will present the remainder of the capital plan. It's broken out into 4 sections. Each of the council priorities, we'll start with public safety, work into water security, address economic development, touch on innovative government. There's probably 44 slides or so we'll go through. I'll probably pause at each council priority. So we'll go through the public safety ones, take a pause and see if there's any questions. We'll move on to water security, pause. I'll just remind you before we get started, for any of these projects that are already in flight, Manager Darwin does provide to you already a summary of all the active capital improvement projects each month. So if you have any questions or interest in those, that's in that slide deck that you get every single month. So the ones, you'll see a lot of redundancy in here for things that you already see, and then so many new ads that come to the table. You'll see new slides in here as well. So I'm going to move at a pretty good clip. The Wildcats tip at 4:09. I'm a little biased, so we're going to get through this as quickly as you can listen. Okay, so you good? If you're going for Clemson, we do have an issue for the rest of the day.
He's going to drag it out if you just go along with him.
We're only accepting questions till 4:09. Glendale, first project up is grip stick expansion. So there's two major things inside of here. The first one is the burn house for the fire department, that $1 million. That project is already progressing forward. So team's making good progress there. The second phase of that, which is the sim house for the adjacent to the shooting range, that particular one is a two-step process to get to that. The first one is for the council that oversees that property to vote on an alteration to the master plan. From that, there's some intergovernmental agency work that's got to be done in the form of an IGA to make sure the responsibilities are clearly delineated. And then from that, the team can transition into the design work. So team's making good progress. In fact, we just had our monthly CIP meeting yesterday, and progress still continues. Next up in the public safety realm is the expansion of a police department evidence facility to be located behind PSAB. This was in the FY24 because of prioritization, some other projects going on. We did slide this project right in the CIP program. So roughly planning on a 21,000 square foot evidence storage and processing facility. You see a two-dimensional image of that depicted here directly behind the PSAB building in the southeast corner. That project is slated to go forward in 25 with design efforts and then construction efforts in 2026. One that I had the privilege of going to see my first day on the job is the storage of vehicles at the impound yard at the MOC. This is a unique challenge that cities are faced with because there is statutory requirements to hold on to vehicles until suspect or the incarcerated individual passes away, or like 99 years. So you have to retain property for an extended period. There is a vintage 1989 Ford T-Bird. It used to be maroon, that's now gray because it has been sitting out there for the better part of 3 decades, but we are statutorily required to keep it. The team has done a fantastic job of coming up with an interim solution for this. They've borrowed some property to the west of one of their peer agencies, departments, in order to be able to make space for now. But there is a need here. You'll see in a couple of slides later a proposed solution. We have to deal with some drainage on property that the city acquired, and the teams are working together to solve this problem on that opposite property. One that we're really pleased about and is making some progress is a joint public safety facility located in the northern part of the city. So we were happy to announce several months ago the identification of a location off of Twin Buttes Road north of the CAP up in North Point. The land acquisition has been figured out. We know the 5 acres. They know where it's going to go. The architect and the construction management company have been selected, negotiations have been completed, the documentation's working its way through procurement. So now as that goes, now the teams can get started on the actual design and pre-construction planning. Additionally, the developer had just transacted some land up in this space about 2 weeks ago, and so they are really getting excited to grade Twin Buttes Road. They will be grading the 5-acre parcel simultaneous to that. There's blasting that has to happen to get there. So there's a lot of planning that will happen throughout the remainder of this calendar year to bring that to fruition. And the teams are working together to see, because this will be a joint police and fire. So this will be a more of a district fire station than a neighborhood fire station. It will also, is currently planned as an expandable police substation. So we start with a footprint and then in the future can expand as the city grows in this area. Oh, I gotta go. Got so excited I started skipping slides. As a continuation of our fire station and support facility refreshes. With the team is wrapping up stations 1 and 3 now. I believe 3 is complete, 1 is nearing completion. They're waiting for the receipt of some customized shower doors. Those will go in. They got to finish the parking lot. That project will be wrapped up, and then the teams will be transitioning into these ones. Fires with Station 6, Station 7, so those will be happening in the next fiscal year upon your approval of those projects. Although often not referred to as a public safety project, if you live in this area, the drainage in the streets in this area is a public safety hazard. This is a very significant project, many years in the making. The design for this project at 67th Avenue, Pinnacle Peak Road, north of Happy Valley, is at 90% complete. The difficult aspect right now is acquiring the right-of-way. There are many landowners that have to be dealt with. The complications with moving this amount of stormwater is significant, about 720 cubic feet per second when it really gets moving. So there is a lot of details to get through. The team has worked with CCV, who is the major property owner there on the corner of Hatfield and 67th Avenue, to devise a construction schedule. Has been mindful of the school traffic. This project will be very disruptive for a period of time, though. There is no doubt about it, but it has to be done. The homeowners southwest of this area are in much need of us addressing this stormwater runoff, because we've seen significant damage to neighboring homes through storms over the years. So the team has done a fantastic job. I do want to highlight one thing here, which is this project was kind of stuck for a while with a 50-50 split with the flood district, and the team did a fantastic job of working with them to come up with a 65-35 split, and that allowed the additional funding from the flood district to come forward to allow this project to progress. I spoke a little bit ago about the MOC and the evidence storage. So part of that solution there will address 2 problems at one time. 75th Avenue and Olive, this land was acquired as part of a larger land deal, specifically to deal with floods and a basin for retention here in this area. However, the team is going to work, the drainage team is going to be working with the police department to design and use a portion of this property to create a walled-off environment specifically to address the growth of that facility, impound yard, that's located at the MOC. So it's a great use of city assets to free up space at the MOC and then leverage this space here to solve that other problem. Again, I'm moving at a pretty good clip because I assume there'll be a handful of questions. So if I'm moving too quick, Mayor, you can give me a nod and have me slow down. If you do this, I'll move faster.
Keep going.
Another flood and drainage project. So the team has currently launched a study. So if you look at the map here, you have Grand Avenue northeast of Grand Avenue, Peoria Avenue, pretty much 60, looks like 72nd up to Cactus. There's a pretty significant flood area here. And so a couple things here. You've got a study that's been commissioned, also evaluating acquisition of land. You see the little orange box right there? That's the corner of 83rd and Grand. There's, you might mind you, there's Park and Ride close to that. You've got a billboard that sits right there. So we're currently evaluating the acquisition of that land that would be necessary in order to serve as a retention basin to collect all this drainage. And it is an issue that's been ongoing for many, many years. Northern Parkway, if you recall, you had a study session on 3-5 talking about the scope change for that project. Originally, the project in its totality stretched from the 303 and was originally intended to run all the way to the US 60. Because of budget restrictions, this McDOT-led project has had to be truncated a little bit. The western bounds have altered slightly. The eastern bounds have pulled in essentially from US 60 to 91st Avenue. So again, this project was just presented to you about a month ago, not even that, 3 weeks ago. The city's cost share on this project is roughly $4.7 million, and of which $3 million of that is planned inside of this. Is a Prop 400E funded project, so all jurisdictions are excited to get that done before those funds expire. Because of the truncated extents of that property being pulled from US 60 into 91st Avenue, this project was added. to do two things. One, put a sidewalk on the north side of Northern between 83rd and 85th, as well as to add a turning lane, or a decel and a turning lane in front of the Harvest Church to be able to clear traffic off of Northern Parkway when the church sees heavy times of traffic. Got a handful more street slides to get through, and then we'll open it up for questions. This one has been of particular interest over the last couple of weeks. I'll remind you, there was an accident, if I had to guess, I think it was last Wednesday evening. A young girl was hit at 72nd Avenue here. And so the team has done a couple things in addition to what they already had in flight. So what you see depicted in the yellow bar on Joe Max Avenue from 75th Avenue to 72nd Avenue was already a contemplated expansion of that road. If you live in the area, Joe Max has been expanded already across the Elora Vita South boundary. The city had acquired property several years ago and is now moving forward with construction in FY25 as design is complete. And included in that is a signalized intersection at 75th Avenue. Then the purpose for that signalized intersection is because it's intended to be part of the trail crossing. When you come up the river there, you'll come up 77th, move down Joe Max, crosses 75th Avenue to continue on up 75th Avenue and up and over the hill. However, the team has also taken the opportunity to expand the signal warrant study to include 72nd Avenue, which is the main entry and exit out of Elora Vita North. And they've also extended that down to two other intersections, Terramar to Joe Max, as well as East Wing Vista Trail and Terramar, to make sure that they've adequately studied the intersection for safety reasons. Shifting to a couple of projects we highlighted last night in our webinar with the community. This first one being El Mirage Road, Loop 303 to Joe Max. This is an exciting project and has a lot of reasons why. Number one, it's important to our neighbors in Surprise who need some additional access to their community. Number two, it's important to our community members in Vistancia, Lake Pleasant Heights, and soon-to-be Saddleback Heights to offer a fourth entry point into the community. So you've got Lone Mountain Parkway, you've got Joe Max, you've got Happy Valley, the transitions to Vistancia, but being able to plan El Mirage traffic interchange north out of the 303 across the Beardsley Canal. Excitingly, this project was kicked off this week. This is an ADOT-led, federally funded Prop 400 project. ADOT had a kickoff meeting this week in our office. They are launching the DCR, the Design Concept Report, to really figure out that alignment. The next complicated piece of this is going to be right-of-way acquisition. Is it the Micken Dam, right? That's the McMicken Dam has to be crossed, which means we have to include about every jurisdiction that needs to be involved, including the Army Corps of Engineers, the Flood District, FEMA. So it will be a complicated right-of-way acquisition, but it is a project that is grossly needed. Speaking of projects that are grossly needed, there is a two-phased approach to addressing Vistancia Boulevard and Happy Valley Road. If you live in this area and have to get through here, it is quite congested. Staff have brought forth a project for this upcoming fiscal year for your consideration and hopeful approval, which is an alteration, an interim step of putting dual left turn lanes of Happy Valley to Happy Valley, essentially. Heading westbound, but also dual lefts coming out of Happy Valley to northbound Vistancia Boulevard. So that would be phase one of a project. Phase two, the team is proposing a complete realignment of this intersection. This is a complicated project, hence the interim dual lefts. But essentially, the team is moving forward with the Design Concept Report award. That will then lead into land acquisition, including the construction of a temporary bypass. So because this intersection is so busy, ultimately the team would have to move into the state trust land, which exists just to the northeast of this, build a temporary bypass, realign the whole intersection, Vistancia north-south with 119th Avenue, Happy Valley to be relatively east-west flat, and help free up that intersection. I will point out that this $14.6 million is the current best estimate from when this intersection was studied. I do believe it'll be a bit of a struggle to maintain that budget as we look forward. Looks like, wow, there's more here than I thought. A couple more to go. I wanted to highlight this one because this came to us in a couple of different ways. There is a parcel, so the map you're looking at here shows Basis High School is along Yearling. You have Basis Elementary there off of Lake Pleasant Parkway. If you live in the area, you might know what it means to get queued and stacked in that traffic. Well, there's a 27-acre parcel that sits just west of Basis High School. There's a series of about 2 landowners and about, I'm going to say 12 to 15 acres that sits north of Basis. And they've come to us trying to help find a solution to activate the 27 acres behind the high school. And what we said was, hey, the city might be a player in a solution if it brings public benefit in crossing this wash, because it's a pretty serious wash, which need a box culvert. And what we said was, if the developers could get together, work on a solution that helps us alleviate the traffic issue for a Basis and clearing some of that queuing that happens on the road, we might be a player in helping problem solve this broader community benefit. So that's what this project is all about, is about activating the land for economic development while also clearing the lanes and Lake Pleasant Parkway for public safety. Second council meeting in February, we were here, the team was here in Public Works doing an update on the pavement preservation, pavement rehabilitation program. Ultimately, this is the list of projects that would stem for fiscal year 25 in this CIP. So there's a whole litany of them here. But being a citizen of Peoria, I'm appreciative of the quality of the roads here. And so I think supporting this program and continuing it on is a fantastic thing. How many I got left? 3 to go. So moving forward, looking at ADA accessibility, part of being an accessible community is constantly being on the forefront looking for areas to address ADA efficiencies and meet our public right-of-way accessibility guidelines. So what's in front of you here for consideration are 3 very specific projects, the address locations listed, but essentially making sure that we have a community that is accessible to all of our community members. And the last one up in the public safety realm, Deer Valley Road. So several years ago when the bridge was built that extended Deer Valley to create traffic flow into Surprise, this intersection became very activated. And so if you live in the area and traverse this, we know that these get extended stacking and queuing from the north and southbound Lake Pleasant Parkway to east and west Deer Valley. Essentially, this project proposes dual left-hand turn lanes, northbound and southbound onto the east and west Deer Valley Road. And with that, Mayor, I'll answer any questions on public safety.
Okay. Councilor Finn.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one question on the street, page CIP 10, the rehabilitation, which was CIP 158. My question is, we have maybe $11.4 million allocated in fiscal year 2025, another 6.9 in 2026, but then it's just blank all the way through 2034. And my question is, do we just not know because we just can't see that far out? Or I would think there'd be something in there for those years, but they're zeroed out. I was just curious what the thought process was on that.
Yeah, Councilmember Finn, that we have 2 separate programs in the CIP for pavement. One is this rehab program, and there's another one that's preservation.
Yep.
The rehab, several years ago, and this was when Kevin was Public Works Director, I believe, we came up with a plan to tackle some of our roads that were in the worst condition and basically take them out of that, bring them up to where we needed them to be. And then the idea was we could focus on just the regular pavement treatments after that. So what this project was those big rehab projects, and we budgeted it for like 5 straight years of $6 million, if I remember right. It's about $30 million investment to bring those up to standard. And then, but the majority of the money ongoing is in the preservation project.
Okay, so if something comes up that needs rehabilitation, we'll address it at that time. My
Yes.
concern about that is that, it's going to end up probably taking away from something else if we have to put it in there. So I didn't know if there was a plug number. We spend about $1 million a year in rehabilitation, or I was just curious why they were all zeros.
Yeah, they do request specific rehab projects as well, and then we evaluate those every year and sometimes put them in as their own separate project.
Okay. might think about maybe putting a placeholder in there moving forward to kind of hold some monies, but just,
And we do that.
I'm not a streets guy, so
You
I
don't see it here, but we have placeholders like that in our forecasts, just in case those things come up.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. Good presentation, Michael. Lots of good information. So on one of your slides for CIP 149, talking about the Joe Max Road, are you tying that in to CIP 182, which is a traffic study for another signal on Joe Max, which isn't slated until FY '30? Shouldn't we be looking at doing that, as close together as possible rather than doing them in segments 5 years apart from each other?
Mayor, Vice Mayor Edwards, great question. Ultimately, the team is studying those things, and the warrant study will dictate the timing of it, so there may be some movement. So there's a couple things going there. You also have a signal that we didn't highlight in here at 83rd and Joe Max. So you do have a signal that's just now being, the design just now starting. You have the design completed 75th. So using our intelligent traffic system, they will be able to move traffic specific ways and be able to get good flow through there. But this study that's being done that encapsulates 72nd Avenue, East Wing, as well as Terramar, may alter some of that strategy.
So would you come back at a different time and say, your traffic study warrants a signal at Alora Vita, the Joe Max area, you would come back at a later time and say, our study warrants moving that ahead of 30, year 2030?
Yeah, Mayor, Vice Mayor, yeah, that is correct. I mean, and we've had some open discussions around should we even, I mean, as this study comes out, should we be constructing the 75th Avenue? And I think the answer to that's yes, because we do expect a lot of pedestrian traffic there because of the trail. So yes, if it warrants, when they look at, the traffic flows there, they look at any incidences that occurred in the area. If necessary, the team will definitely be back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go to the next.
Mr. Mayor, we'll move on to the next section. It is 3:10. I'm just doing a time check because we've got 59 minutes till tip-off.
Not that anybody's paying attention. Okay, a few people are.
They're all staring at my bald spot, and we're moving on. So, Mr. Mayor, Council, we're moving into the now water security phase. And so this team does a fantastic job with some very, very big projects. And the first two that are up here are significant, and they take, the note I have to myself on this particular project is still building. So the expansion of the Beardsley wastewater treatment facility, expansion from 4 million gallons a day to 6 million gallons a day. Again, we just got an update yesterday. The team's working through a lot of little details, and included inside of this expansion is also the reclaimed booster pump project, which is going to help move reclaimed water out of this and into reclaimed loop 2, which we'll touch on here in a slide. A couple things I'll just highlight with this and the next one. When it comes to water security, we hear water resources all the time, but it needs to include water resources, the movement of potable water, but equally as important is wastewater treatment and the utilization of that water. Other communities have missed the mark on that. We've seen other large projects around the city now spooling up around the greater Phoenix area because of the cost and the implications of projects like this. So our team's done a good job of staying out in front of development here with this 2 million gallon expansion. Speaking of expansions, the Joe Max wastewater facility, which services west of the Agua Fria, really supports Vistancia, Lake Pleasant Heights, Saddleback expansion, is currently undergoing a 0.75 million MGD expansion from 2.25 to 3. It's slated to be done in the spring of 2025. A couple of nuances I just want to highlight with this. If you look inside of the CIP plan, last year there was an expansion of this plant sitting out in 3031. You will see it pulled into 27, 28. We're still evaluating that. A couple of nuances inside of that. We've seen a lot of growth, a lot more permits being pulled on the housing side. But as we're working on the 5 North at Vistancia and the economic plays that are there, we're really having to think through and plan diligently on the wastewater treatment for any employment opportunities there. So that includes Amcor, that might include other people, but we're working closely to make sure we really are planning this next expansion to time it right, just because of the cost. it can be challenging, but we just got new, fresh updates from all the residential development in the area. We'll bring that into. So it is possible this 27 to 28 expansion that you see in the CIP will slide back out. Maybe it splits the difference and goes to 29, 30. A lot of detail, and we'll probably find that resolution in the next 60 to 90 days, we're hopeful. Speaking of reclaimed water movement, I'll just touch on a couple of huge projects for us here. So I'll touch on Project 1 first. Several segments are done. Last segments are moving to completion. And the big thing to highlight on the exhibit that's in the top right corner is getting reclaimed water to Paloma Park. And so we heard some discussion about Paloma Park earlier. Paloma is currently irrigated with without reclaimed water. It is done with potable water. 40 million gallons a year is used to service that park. When this line is finished, which is shortly, it's coming in the fall, you will be then bringing reclaimed water out of the Beardsley plant, which is at the river end, Beardsley Road, bringing that water up and now using reclaimed water to irrigate that park, which is a very responsible use of our water resources. Second big project is a connection of that water line. So when you're coming up Lake Pleasant Parkway, you'll see that work heading westbound. That's the west wing light, turns into Lone Mountain Parkway. We'll run across the river there, cross the 303, through the 5 north at Vistancia, which connects this project of 2, will connect the Beardsley plant with the Jomax plant, allowing for efficient movement of water throughout the system. This will also serve as our primary source of production water for the Amcor project. Shifting a bit from the reclaimed lens to the water resource lens. So this is our project's Zone 6C reservoir and booster pump station. So this is 5 wells being drilled up north of the 303, west of Lake Pleasant Parkway, 3 sites on Arizona State Trust land, 2 where we're negotiating a relationship with the Catholic Diocese to locate wells on their property, to not only drill, but then be able to have easements to move that water to a booster pump station that sits adjacent to Lake Pleasant Parkway, just south of the 303, really serving 2 functions at that location. Zone 5E would be a redundant system, so Zone 5E sits below the 303. And essentially, that serves as the ability to recover water that the city has been storing underground in the Agua Fria aquifer as part of our recharge program in preparation for or in the event of any shortages on the Colorado River and CAP reductions. Then the ability to recover this water that's been stored underground in the aquifer, and we can move it south into Zone 5E or push it north into Zone 6E, allowing us to work with Arizona State Land to open up property in that space. One thing I think gets overlooked but is important, Kevin and I just went on a drive or a tour of a lot of the northern part of the city at our local water distribution pumping stations, and so making sure that we have good maintenance of those systems. This is a project of rehabilitation of 5 of our 28 well sites in the city. So constantly staying on top of technology, constantly staying on top of maintenance is imperative in order to move these water resources throughout the city. So this particular project is addressing that. Shifting then from water resources now to water conservation programs, something you've heard about here a couple of different times. But this project essentially is water conservation program that is partially funded by the city, $650,000. The balance of $2.5 million through a WIFA grant program that the team had submitted in order to remove turf in non-programmable areas. So this isn't removing turf down in the flat places where people play, but more importantly, removing turf where we're expending water to irrigate hillside slopes that could be backfilled with other hardscapes to reduce water consumption. And with that, Mayor, Council, I'll take any questions on water security.
Commissioner Patina.
Thank you, Mayor. Michael, the 40 million gallons that you use at Paloma Park right now, once you start using reclaimed water, will that eliminate the use of that 40 million potable water?
Mayor, Councilmember Patina, yes. So ultimately what will happen, yes, that new reclaimed water coming in would then mean that whole park is, in essence, the reclaimed water will start going into the lake. The water from the lake is then pumped out and used for irrigation. So yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Schaefer.
Thanks, Mayor. Mike, quick question. We didn't go over this in the slides, but CIP, let's see, I wrote down, CIP page 238, this is the advanced water purification treatment. 164 million or 165 million over 3 years, and I believe it starts in FY '32. This is, oh, yes, Kevin.
I was going to say, I could feel that one,
Yep.
but go ahead.
Okay.
Kevin, yeah.
So my question, and this is taking my understanding just by looking at on the page here, this is taking the toilet water to drinking water, for lack of better terms. Is that correct, Kevin?
Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer, you're right on target. It's gone by 3 different names, you know, the toilet to tap, the direct potable reuse, and now we're using the term advanced purification.
Okay.
But all the same technology.
So a couple questions. I mean, this might be a great program in the future. My questions is, has the city council approved this purification process, or have we received information about it? Have we gone to the public? I kind of feel voting on a $165 million project without information is putting the cart in front of the horse.
Sure, we've taken this in increments. So the technology, Mayor and Councilmember Schaefer, one of the first things that we did invest in is a examination of the technology with the city of Phoenix and, quite frankly, I think 6 other cities. We're doing a collaborative study on that related to one of the treatment plants that we can tie into with the city of Phoenix. So that's intended to give us some information. We've also commissioned a study with Carollo to look at how this technology would work in our own city. For us, it's been, from a planning standpoint, more of a hedge at this point, recognizing that we have diminishing Colorado River water. In that sense, well water is certainly becoming a very limited resource, and so we know that this is in the future. Again, if you look at these elements, they're out in our outer years, in years 9 and 10, I believe. 8, 9, and 10. And so the idea is that we still have a lot of ramp-up work to understand if this is going to be the ultimate decision.
Kevin, you said Phoenix. What other cities are doing this or looking into this technology right now?
I think they're all looking at it right now to understand what's going on. I might call on Dave Burks to come on up to the podium, and he can probably give you more details of the collaboratives that are going on.
And Mayor and Council and Councilmember Schaefer, if I may, just, I think the reason we're including this in the CIP and those out years is to make sure that both council and the public are aware that this will be part of our water future, just as it's going to be the water future for all municipalities in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and that it's going to be an expensive option. Now, because it's 8 to 10 years out, we don't know. We certainly all hope that those amounts will drop. But the best evidence that we have today is that this is going to be an incredibly expensive endeavor, but it absolutely will be part of our water future, just like it's going to be part of the water future for the entire valley, if not the entire state. So I think that's what I'm certainly David Burks can give us a much better explanation, but I think that's why, and that's why we want to make sure the numbers are large enough so you all get, an idea and the public gets an idea. This is not going to be an inexpensive option, but absolutely is going to be an option and it's going to be part of our water future.
Thanks, Henry. It might be a great program, so thank you.
All of the cities, correct, are down here entertaining or looking into this. City of Scottsdale, City of Phoenix, I'm meeting with the director of Surprise Water Resources next week or the week after to have this discussion. City of Glendale, Mesa, this is going to be the water of the future. How it's going to happen, there's a lot of moving pieces to it. We actually have brought a consultant on board to take a look at all of our reclamation facilities and look at our system and give us some guidance on what would be best for Peoria. We're at the very early stages of it, but we feel that at some point it will be in our future. So we're trying to get ahead of the ballgame and plan because of the cost of it.
Thank you, David. Any information I can get on it before the vote would be wonderful. So thank you.
Okay.
If I could add one other note, Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer, is that the study for this technology was actually approved in FY24, but it's carried forward into FY25 as the advanced treatment study I think it was that 237, page 237, the 450,000. That was actually carried forward from this current year, because we just got started on it about a month ago.
About a month ago, yes, correct.
Thank you.
Mayor, council will now move into the economic development portion of this. And so for those behind, I will actually do a rare thing and smile on this next slide. Because on Tuesday, we will come in and we will be bringing forth two development agreement and leases for your consideration. A lot of work has done. So we're really excited to come in next Tuesday and really walk you through a long history in downtown from 1998 essentially to today. And we will bring forth two opportunities, one for a barbecue restaurant, Caldwell County Barbecue at Peoria, and a second one called Jefferson House, which is a partnership between the purveyor of the Churchill and the brothers that operate Axiom Church and Driftwood Coffee. This has been a lot of work to get to this point. We're very fortunate to have participated and picked up on work that has been going on for an extended period of time. And we'll come in, like I said, next week and really highlight the amount of planning and efforts that gone in to create the regulatory framework, the land assemblage and the deconstruction or demolish of facilities to create the pathway. But really the vision of this council that gave the clear direction to say, hey, let's go activate the space by doing some return on investment approach. So again, we'll be here Tuesday to talk about two things for your consideration, which is a return on investment play of constructing two buildings with very specific lease terms associated with those. It's been a lot of hard work by a lot of great people on the team. So the funding you see here essentially will help handle those two projects. Third will be a renovation of the old schoolhouse. Additional funds inside of this budget amount will also address the walkability in the area and some of the other spaces necessary to make that happen. So a lot of great work, just a great partnership with the community, a lot of discussions going on there to make sure that the team is delivering on your vision, on their desires, and we're really excited to bring that forth. So Tuesday night should be a good time, we hope. Whitney Crossing. So this road, this was in the plan last year. It got moved a bit, and I want to highlight a few things with Whitney Crossing. So if you haven't made your way down Cotton Crossing or in this way in a while, I encourage you to do so. The amount of construction and activity going on with the commercial buildings, the roughly 420,000 square foot of commercial space in the area, the multifamily, the two multifamily plays, the townhouses that are going in is all very significant. And to that point, we have the three major multifamily developments going in and around within a half mile of downtown, comprises about 1,000 residential units. And that's between Peoria Place, Streamliner, and Overland. But you may have seen versions of this road that actually went through 83rd Avenue. And so after some discussions with the team and some of the complexity of pulling off a roundabout there, you see an alteration in this view. So what we have now is a 70-foot right-of-way, almost like a commercial driveway that enters into the property with a roundabout in the back end. That allows us to forego the roundabout there and deal with the oddity of that intersection. But you'll also see in the image some walkable space, so that way we still maintain the walkability. Hear that? Sorry, my prosthetic is making funny noises when I hear that. Yeah. So we'll still have walkability.
Noises in your head again?
Yes, yeah. I hear noises in my head, but it's because I have a prosthetic, and when things happen, it reverberates. It's not that I'm bat crap crazy. It's that it's actually causing noises in my head. So we'll maintain the walkability from the multifamily across Cotton Crossing to be able to create the connectivity to downtown. A very large project with multiple phases and a lot of complexity. So you might wonder why this is sitting in the economic development bucket. It's really about bringing infrastructure to this part of the city. So currently, there is no infrastructure, no water or sewer or reclaimed water in this space. And so we've brought a couple of projects together. You'll see 4 of them specifically around the design and construction of Lake Pleasant Parkway, which is going to include potable water, reclaimed water, sewer, under the 303, all the way up to State Route 74, and then planning the final road alignment, the crossing of the CAP, and full construction of that road up to State Route 74. A couple of nuances in that. The design will be the entire roadway and all the infrastructure underneath. The construction would most likely not be that entire roadway. That construction would probably be segmented, probably 303 to the canal, then maybe the canal crossing, and then maybe even 1 or 2 segments north of that. There is some oddities that we have to contend with at State Route 74 LPP intersection. In the governor's budget, 2 years ago, the city had been given $5 billion to design that intersection, State Route 74, Lake Pleasant Parkway. The governor has proposed to remove that $5 million from that budget. So there's some nuances that have to be thought through there. But this becomes a major part of us planning the land activation in this area. And if you recall, Mr. Jaquez, Ms. Deaver were here last council session talking about general plan amendments and zoning cases. They specifically highlighted the Peoria Innovation Core. This roadway, the utility infrastructure is critical to bringing that land online. 2 more to go in economic development. So if you haven't been out to the sports complex lately and haven't driven by the Common Bond project, I encourage you to do so. I think if you skip a week and don't drive by it, you'll find something completely different. The pads have progressed quickly. One of the buildings is vertical. This particular project is addressing Paradise Lane. So the traffic on Paradise Lane, it needs to be contended with because we expect more volume. Supporting the restaurants. And so you have a couple things. You have the creation of a new driveway entrance into the existing parking lot, which is shaded in purple. It's directly across from the adjoining apartment complex. They will construct the turn lane. They will construct the undergrounds for a future signal when it's warranted. They will also obliterate the striping that's out there, restripe it for this particular use. And then lastly, this might be the first time you're seeing some new imagery for the sports complex. So a lot of work has gone into coming up with some additional concepts to improve the sports complex. So you see a new building facade. You also see some right field bleachers and social connections there. So this is fresh, new imagery that's being then shopped and coordinated with the 2 baseball teams to determine exactly what the final configurations and decisions look like, as well as the timing to move forward. With that, Mayor, Council, I'll take any questions on the economic development side.
Questions?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. Mike, we're really excited about the downtown redevelopment project. So I just have an accounting question. I saw in FY24 that we allocated $9.9 million to that project, and then I see that it's 14.7, but I didn't see any carryover. So did we spend that 9.9, or do we miss the carryover into the 14.7?
Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer, no, what you actually have is a consolidation of several lines that existed. So there should be there in carryover. You go back.
Yeah, I mean, we essentially combined 2 projects into one. We had a separate project last year. I don't remember exactly what it was. Streetscapes? Washington. Streetscape or something. And so we essentially took a number of different downtown projects and combined them into one.
Okay, great. Yeah. Peter, thanks for clarifying. And then CIP 41, Mike, this is the state land purchase, $4.5 million for the purchase of the airport for the land in North Peoria. And then I see a $2.8 million total operating impact over 10 years. So we're looking about $32 million over 10 years. So I guess I have a handful of questions on this one, and I think Kevin's gonna raise.
We'll work together.
when did the city council meet to direct staff to purchase the 500 acres for the Pleasant Valley Airport from the Arizona State Trust land?
Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer. We've actually met more than one discussion globally about our activities in the Peoria Innovation Core. So part of that included an economic engine in that discussion. Some of those conversations we've had in executive session. So I'm going to be a bit remiss on getting into all of the land acquisition detail. But in essence, inside of this, whether it's an air park or a tech park, essentially in the conversations that we've had, has included the acquisition of some land for an economic engine.
Okay, Mike, I think the gap that I'm missing is last year in the CIP, we funded $500,000 for airport study. And haven't seen the results of the feasibility study of the airport. And then also, have we received approval from the Department of Defense for Luke Air Force Base and Deer Valley from Phoenix and environmental? And have we gone out to the citizens or the residents about the need for an airport? I just have a hard time, once again, cart before the horse, spending $32 million on an airport if we don't have the feasibility, we don't have the approvals, and we don't have the public input.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer, good questions. So let's just break them down each. I think I heard 5 questions in there. I'm going to do my best to pick each of them. So the first one is airport study. So that study is still ongoing. It's in draft. We're reviewing that. When that draft is done, we will come before the council and have that conversation. We need to make sure that it's complete. And until that's complete, we're not really in a position to address your second question of going out to the community and having those conversations. Relative to the third question you had, which was discussions with Luke Air Force Base, those conversations happen on a monthly basis. Very specifically, we have engaged to understand what any limitations are, what any challenges. We have not heard any, and we'll get into that when the study is complete and we're in a position to come back. So you said land. Environmental was the last question you had asked. It's part of the draft study that we're reviewing. And again, when that's ready, we'll come back before council and get there. Now, when we're planning all of these things, it is a very complicated piece of work to plan, because whether an airport can be built or cannot be built, that's many years out. And so for us as a staff, as we're planning through this economic engine and the conversations that we've had very specifically on this, we have to plan each component of it. We have to plan the zoning case for 6,700 acres. We have to plan the boundaries of some land. We have to think through the study, and we have to be looking out in the future. So when we do come back, we've contemplated each of these aspects, because it is a challenging thing to say, hey, I need to study the need for an airport. Then I have to go to the community, but I also have to be planning for each component. Every one of these decisions requires council authority, council approval, but we as staff have to plan a decade in the future for each and every single one of these components. So it's just to bring this back to where we first started in answering your questions. Study's still in draft. When it's completed, we will be back in front of you. We will be back in front of you again, I believe now for the 3rd time, to talk about the state land pick, the Peoria Innovation Core in totality, the 6,700 acres, what that means for the 500 acres, what that acquisition strategy looks like. So we've had those conversations a couple times. We will be back with you in short order, but until that study is done, it would be premature for us to come back. Additionally speaking, we're still in a complicated land negotiation with the state trust, Arizona State Land Department, and how this will all work out. And until each of those components are really together, it's premature for us to come back and be able to make a recommendation. However, we have to be looking far enough into the future to plan not only the staff's time and energy to design and construct, we have to be thinking through the fiscal components and forecasting to the council what that looks like.
Mike, a question about the study. I saw the 500,000 in the study for the CIP for FY24. I also saw another 500,000 in the CIP for FY25. Is that a second study, or did we spend money on the study and we're asking for another 500K? I know I'm getting into the budget, but I think it's very appropriate, like at this point.
Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if there's in the CIP or in the operating budget, but I believe it's in the operating budget. So yes, we have spent money not only on the study. There's the 4 parts of the air park study, right? There's 2 economic development studies that have to be done with that. There's also consulting fees and experts that work with Luke Air Force Base with us. So there's a myriad of fees. Yes, you see $500,000 in the next. As we look in, we're actually looking at land planning. We're looking at how will we responsibly use the land? What would it look like? What would the air park component and business locations look like? So yeah, there's a very meaningful, and we can answer some of those questions in the operating as well. But yeah, there is 500 in the operating for this year, really to continue master planning discussions and other things that are all critical components in a multi-year journey in order to get this. I missed one of the questions you had asked earlier, which was a discussion with Deer Valley Airport and those. They were here 2 weeks ago, sat in a room with us, and have actually shared their full financials of their air park. We're actually going to use one of the consultants they use to help contemplate, is this thing feasible? How does it work? What would it look like? So when we come back, we can actually answer questions in a very informative way. Here's what Kaufman has told us from 4 parts of a feasibility study. Is there demand? What would what's that forecast look like? What does the infrastructure look like? What is the costing? What are the financials to stand one up and construct it and operate it? So we've gotten that from Deer Valley. So each of these things are critical, and on top of that is how do you acquire land or even plan for what that would look like? If we came to you prematurely, there would be too many questions. So as those come in, we'll work on giving the council a forecasted date on when we'll come back, because it's probably in pretty short order. But with these things still in draft, it would be premature for us to give that information.
Mike, timeline, understand the planning, understand the studies, and talking with the Department of Defense in Phoenix and everything. So at what point do we kind of project to include the residents of the area or the residents of Peoria? Because I understand that we want to make sure that we have the studies and the data and everything to be able to go to them, but kind of, I'm getting a lot of questions from residents about the airport. So at what point do we loop them in, I guess, from a high level?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer, I'll get back with you a very specific answer. I wouldn't mind doing a webinar on that, because I think when there's fallacies out there that cargo planes are landing and 747s are flying in, these are fallacies that we have a responsibility to tell folks. It's not the type of aircraft we're looking for in this location. Should this go forward, right? There's still a decision to be made, should this go forward. So we'll get back with you with a very specific date. One of those things, too, is we really have to answer a lot of these questions out of this study in order to be able to come back and give an informed conversation. I think you saw even last night when we provided information on like the AMCOR project. We really have to put in the work, so when we speak with some authority and some information. So we're still a bit away from that. We'll get to it, but if you give us a week or so, I think we could forecast for you when we'll come in front of council with the totality of a package to bring some meaningful content, so we can talk through not only the study, which construction of airport is years to do, but land acquisition has to happen early. And so there's a lot of dynamics inside of that. We'll get you an answer here in a short week or so, and when we can come in front of council, have this in-depth conversation.
One last question, Mike, and then we can move on. I saw the 4.5 million in capital, or actually, excuse me, 4.8 in capital, and then 2.8 every single year for the next 10 years. Is that 4.8, that's the 10% down that I'm reading, and then we have to pay incremental payments over 10%? Is that?
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer, I'm going to answer part of your question. The $4.8 million would be a down payment. Okay. But since we've had a lot of this conversation in contract negotiations, I'm going to hold for the moment to answer that question, because I'm afraid some of that might be protected information. So I'd like to get council to review and discuss, because we have to work through a land acquisition and a lot of little details there, and I want to be very mindful that I don't say anything I shouldn't be saying in this particular forum. But we'll get you an answer.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Mike.
Yes, sir.
So just to point something out, because we do have one reporter, is there only one reporter in the room? Can you raise your hand if you're a reporter besides the one? Sorry. Just because I want to address this. If you haven't picked up on this, the city of Peoria is getting ready to do what is considered the largest state land deal in state history with the municipality that would generate $3 to $4 billion for state education. That's a big deal, $3 to $4 billion for state education. The way to do this, and we're not going to get into the details of this yet because some of these conversations have been in executive session and so on and so forth. The negotiation is still ongoing. We are working with the state to accomplish these things, and there is a revenue component of this. And we do not know if we will have an airport or if we will have a tech park at this location. Our goal is to have a new municipal air park. And if nobody's figured that out, we've talked about that for the last 2.5 years, and we've talked about that for the last 16 months in this chamber. Our goal is to create a revenue-generating machine that would be in the north aspect of Peoria, along Highway 74 and Lake Pleasant, that would be approximately 500 acres. To do that, that is a comparison or a comparable to Scottsdale Air Park. So if you look at Scottsdale Air Park's generation, and if you take Mr. Jim Rounds' study, based on what Scottsdale Air Park has done, it creates $10 billion, billion with a B, of economic impact to the city of Scottsdale. I just want a portion of that for the city of Peoria, just a portion, just a little bit. We don't need it all. So we're not trying to take Scottsdale's dollars, but the goal is to create this. We have to take the first step. We have to have the vision to do this, and we have to be able to generate the capability to do this. We will obviously, very clearly, be talking to the public while we're doing this. But the reason I point this out to people in the room and whoever's watching is it is time to wake up and see what we're actually trying to accomplish, because this is a giant deal, not only for the city of Peoria and its residents and the future tax base of this city, but also state education. It potentially is the largest single influx of tax dollars or dollars in to state education from one entity in one deal. It's a big deal. So with that, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, just a time check. We've 25 minutes
You're
till
3:44.
I just want to make sure we're square. We've got 5 slides to go. Keep questions to the minimum. We will not miss the game.
We're missing the game.
We're missing the game.
You're not done after this. You still
I
have-
know,
you have still- you have still-
but you guys are breaking my heart, man.
Just to be clear, there's more.
Yeah, this is only the first section of the meeting. Municipal complex. So a couple of projects going here. We've consolidated 3 into one slide. The pictures that are there are of the yard. We still have the hand-drawn pictures that we did from the council retreat back in January. That final work order is moving through procurement so we can bring in the consultant to do the next round of imagery for you. But I will tell you, since we did was it the Arts and Culture Day with the PUSD, that really did indicate what a great impact we can have in the front of City Hall, bringing the community into the space and is influencing the next step of the front yard. Additionally, inside of this, you see a rollover of the council chambers projects. I know the team has interviews next week with 3 designers, and they're also going to test an AI application to see what that generates. That should be interesting. Just to make movements here in the council chambers. And then I will highlight the Architectural Services team is leading a re-roofing project that's included here for all of City Hall. So it will be a bit of a mess in the fall, but they've got a good solid plan to get us through. So there are 3 projects consolidated into this one slide. Kind of the loop around, and we're almost to the end of this presentation, but Kevin did a fantastic job of highlighting park parity and activities in the funding on the front side. The next 2 slides really talk about some of those detailed activities. So this first one is park court renovations and playground improvements. That refresh program dealing, I'm going to say more on the amenity side, dealing with, the playgrounds and dealing with the lighting and the facility painting that is really in need throughout the city to maintain the quality parks that we have. So that's what projects are highlighted here. You see a park court, $250,000, playground is $600,000, park refresh at $1.2 million. Probably one of the less sexy aspects of it, though, is here on the facilities refurbishment. You can see in that imagery, we've got to put money in. You got light poles like that. You've got other things rusting out. You've got an expectation, or what's built in here at $1.45 million to clearly consolidate some of the capital funding into these areas to maintain the quality of what we have. With just 2 to go, the Stadium Trail Phase 2. So Phase 1 of Stadium Trail is virtually complete. There were some quality concerns on a little bit of the railing, so the team has been working with the contractor to get those corrected. So as that's wrapping, design on Phase 2 is nearing completion, and then they will launch into construction of the Phase 2. Just to remind you, this project is predominantly federally funded. City component of it's $1.5 million, with the feds putting forth about $4 million to this particular project. And last but not least, to wrap up the CIP overview, fleet shop replacement, a lot of energy and effort has gone into this. The cost of constructing buildings has grown exponentially, and this cost grew pretty significantly. The team has put in a great amount of effort to get to here. Really happy with that level of effort. Waiting with bated breath for April 9th. That's the day we get the 60% complete drawings and the estimate to match what we have here, but we're really excited to bring this in because the team really needs a better space to work.
And if I can.
Please.
Just, I mean, spent a lot of work over this last year, right-sizing the building, as it says there, really trying to find those ways to get the biggest bang for the buck and economize the size and the dollars. So if you remember, this was over $30 million in our budget last year, so we're down under 24 at this point. So more to come, though.
Brilliant,
Understood.
brilliant.
36.2.
I believe it was.
Yeah.
Not to be exact, but to be exact. And with that, Mayor, Council, we'll take any questions on this section or any other sections we
Finn.
want to talk through.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Trying to get to my, to the page here. Kevin, you and I talked a little bit before council about my concern of how much we're spending in fiscal year 2025. And if you don't have this answer off the top of your head, it's fine. I just wanted to kind of bring the question up.
Sure.
That how much of this is really kind of carryover from projects that didn't get done? It's so heavily weighted in 2025. You look at it and you think, my God, they're spending like drunken sailors. They're spending all this money in 2025. How much of this is carryover that we didn't get done? And again, if you don't have that answer, we can get it later at the next one when we go over this. But I am curious as to how much of that is carryover as opposed to we're just pushing everything forward.
Sure. Sure, thanks for the question.
And no
Mayor.
offense to the sailors, I didn't mean, drunken sailors, I apologize.
Mayor, Councilmember Finn, it's a very good question, and it does look a little out of kilter when you look at how much money is in the front end of the 10-year CIP. That is attributable primarily to the idea of carryover, in that we have about $250 million worth of projects that we are carrying from past CIPs into FY25. The reason for that is kind of multifold. I mean, first and foremost, seems to be we're still working out some of the supply chain issues, and we have some really long lead time elements. So we started the project in 24, maybe even in 23. We still don't have all those materials so that we can actually do the heavy part of the spending and the project development until 25. So that's a big part of it. The other part is that we are, to some extent, front-loaded because we have some pressures in the near term, particularly when we look at water and wastewater projects. With the Colorado River dynamics changing, we have been kind of in a push to get a lot of these large projects underway and going as soon as possible, because they are slow-moving projects and they will take multiple years to get going. You heard in Mike's CIP presentation, just the wells at CAP and Lake Pleasant Parkway. Those wells take take land acquisition, both from state land and from the Catholic Diocese. Both of those are not fast processes to acquire those lands. So a lot of that front-end loading is really attributed to those two factors, and then evens itself out a little bit more as the time goes on. Okay.
Kevin, can I add to that just real quick? We had yesterday was
You
our
realize
month.
that they tip off at 4:09, right?
Yeah,
Okay, I was just checking.
He's watching.
there's a clock right above your head. And when I come up to present later, if my tablet's open, I'm really not paying attention. I won't bring my tablet, Mr. Darman. Yes, so every month, third Wednesday of the month, Henry has an accountability meeting specifically on CIP. And we went through about a 25-minute conversation on this exact thing yesterday, really on two fronts. What won't get done? Like, because a lot of this stuff is front-loaded, and having that healthy operational conversation of how do we get that number right so we get closer in our accuracy of projecting, because the budget guys, they get frustrated with us when we're rolling things forward. But I think the other component of it, too, is making sure we're signaling to you folks. So we've asked the team to go back and think about some measurements, some metrics of their performance. to be able to, number one, highlight the great work we do. I mean, the amount of CIP program managers and team members we have doing this work, and they're second to none. I mean, they, just yesterday, just little details they think through to save the city money and to do things is super impressive. And we have those teams doing work underground, we have those folks doing stuff vertical, we have them doing it in the utility systems, and it's great. But one of the things that we've recognized we need to do a better job to the council is saying, hey, in this $400 million nut, yeah, we maybe have spent the first 100 of it, but we've really encumbered this other 200 million. We just haven't spent the cash yet. And I think that's a piece that gets missed inside of it, and something that we recognize and had a healthy dialogue yesterday in this accountability meeting of what we need to do to clearly articulate to you folks. Because if not, two risks come. You say, well, if you're not gonna spend it, we're not gonna allocate it. Or number two, somebody's gonna have an idea and say, hey, you're not using it for here, let's do it over here. When in reality, we've already committed it. We've signed the contract, because at the end of the day, legally, ethically, we can't sign that contract with somebody without us having the money on hand. But it's also wise of us to hold on to the cash as long as possible. It's just like when Kevin talked earlier about parks. Like, why would we pay for a park when the developer has the responsibility to build it? Like, that's sound, intelligent, fiscal responsible activity. So along the same lines, some of that happens in this. We've got some rollover where we could get a little more discipline on not taking on more than we can accomplish. But at the same token, a lot of this stuff is encumbered. We're just waiting for those portions of the project to come through.
Can I make a point? Because I think we've talked about this briefly, and we talked about it last year. It's kind of like WIP, right? It's kind of like work in progress in this process. You know, if getting an SES box, I think we were talking with Cape last year. I think we were talking about like, just boxes and generators and pumps and those types of things for some of these pump stations. They were like 18 to 48 months out, right? So, but if we didn't allocate those funds and rue that, then we wouldn't have that, and we would get that equipment, but then we wouldn't have the rest of the funds to actually finish those projects. And, but I love the fact that you guys are continuing to actually look at those downstream issues and try to figure that out, so.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilor Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, I have a couple that were not necessarily in your presentation, but I wanted to get some clarification on. One of them was CIP 130, which is the 107th Avenue through to Williams. You've got it slated going out into FY '29, I believe it is. I'm just looking to see, is there an opportunity to move that project up a little bit? Because the amount of traffic that is using that road to cut through rather than using Lake Pleasant Parkway, we're seeing lots of increased traffic issues. And so I'd just like to see that one moved up if possible.
Go ahead. Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor Edwards, appreciate you highlighting this project and appreciate your diligence in going through this with us and calling out this project. So, yeah, we will take that action back and go and see if we can pull that left. As looking at it, the DCR is complete, so we have a design concept report complete on this project. Now it's about getting into the design. Specifically, it looks like it was programmed for 28, 29, and 30, but we will take that back and evaluate. If we can pull this left, I think the one ask that we would probably have back to council, consistent with the conversation we just completed, if we're bringing one left, we probably have a couple of asks of what projects we can move right, so we're not trying to stuff more work into the bag.
100%. Yeah. Next one would be, let's see, where's it out here? CIP 160, which is the Pinnacle Peak sidewalk. In discussions with you, so this would be a delete, not an add. In talking with you, one side of the street, the north side of the street on Pinnacle has a full sidewalk from the start to finish. The other side does not. I just don't see there's warranted to have, that there's a use for that, to add an additional sidewalk on that location. And I think in our conversations, you've kind of indicated that is probably true.
Mayor, Vice Mayor Edwards, yes, based on the conversation we had, staff will take that back and evaluate. To your point, the north side, for a good stretch, especially where parents are dropping off kids and they're walking across to get to the school there, has sidewalk. The team is going to go back and look at the sidewalk crossing at the culvert crossing there, or the culvert that runs perpendicular. But at the same token, we'll also go back and look at the options of sidewalk on the west side of 83rd Avenue. Now, that runs through the county, so there's a bit of complexity there, but we will ask the team to take that action.
So you've already anticipated my next question. That was my next want, was to add a sidewalk onto 83rd, because there's sections of it that are sidewalk and then a good section that's not, and so there's no consistency along that roadway.
Yes,
And then the last ask would be, or study, to look at the possibility of doing a right turn lane at 83rd and Deer Valley. The amount of traffic, especially in the mornings with school traffic, it takes several signals in order to make a right-hand turn if you're going west over to Liberty High School.
Mayor, Vice Mayor Edwards, appreciate that, because I get stuck at that intersection every morning, so not that I'm biased, but I love your idea. We'll ask the team to evaluate and understand what the considerations of that are, and then we can come back and make a recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Crawford.
Just a quick question, and I may have missed this in past discussions, but on CIP, what's the line item? CIP 99, the Rio Vista vacant building, are there plans for it? Oh, sorry, page 5, CIP, page 5. Are there plans for the vacant building?
Mayor Pro Tem Crawford, the first action is really for us to finish the acquisition. So you guys have given us permission to go get that. It has been a laborious process, and we're not quite done. We're trying to push it over the finish line. So the first thing is to get it in our hands, then dispose of the pitching machines, which are a nuisance and an eyesore. Then at that point, the Parks and Recs team will ultimately put together a strategy and then have to come back for a broader conversation. There are some ideas that are out there, but we'll get that, clean it up, and then from there, we can make a recommendation as to the best use of that property.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Mayor, we're scheduled for a quick break
I was
here.
going to say, let's go ahead and take, are you ready? It gives you like 5 minutes to watch tip-off at least, right? That's all I was really trying to pay attention to.
I appreciate you worried about my concerns.
That's what I was concerned about. All right. All right, let's take a 10-minute break. Thank you.
manager, Ben Butler, who does a heavy lifting on this work each and every day. And so with that, he knows this budget inside and out, and we'll turn it over to him to take us through the next part.
Thank you, Kevin. We will start with the administration function. As Kevin mentioned, we have 4 categories that we will go through as we discuss the department operating budgets. This is the first one, administration. It includes 9 departments: the city attorney, city clerk, finance and budget, human resources, information technology, leadership and management, mayor and council, municipal court, and the Office of Communications. A core function of the administration departments is to support the outward-facing departments in the city, such as fire, medical, police, public works, and water services. The administration departments have a staff of 235 full-time employees, a budget of about $60 million. As you can see, 55% of that budget is for personnel, 38% is for contractual services, and the administration departments are funded by the general fund and internal service charges. Internal service charges are how we allocate out the costs of the administration departments to the other departments in the city. Now let's discuss a few of the notable budget items. As the city grows, so does the workload for the administration departments. With that in mind, the city clerk is requesting to increase an existing half-time position to a full-time position as an administrative assistant 2 position. The finance department is requesting a buyer 2 position. Human resources is requesting to increase a half-time position to a full-time position as a senior compensation analyst. And human resources is also requesting an HR consultant position. The city attorney is requesting 2 contract positions, a fixed-term benefit DUI prosecutor and a fixed-term benefited domestic violence prosecutor. We have 3 programs that are at the end of their life: our agenda management and public record software, and our Acela system, which is our permitting system for the city. These departments are requesting funding to either upgrade or replace those systems. And finally, the municipal court is requesting funding for their courtroom AV technology. The current technology is at end of life and needs to be replaced. And with that, Mayor and Council, I am available for questions.
Does anybody have any questions on this topic? Nope, keep going. Thank you.
Oh, well, that happened quick. Mayor, Council, I have the privilege of talking about the development areas of the city, made up of 3 primary departments: planning and community development, development engineering, and economic development services. These departments have the responsibility to safely and efficiently grow the city and also ensure the economic vitality of Peoria. The 3 departments in total comprise about 92 employees, about $20 million. Several funding streams go to support this, including general fund, half cent, streets, and a lot of these expenses are covered through user fees, which these are permitting fees, inspection fees, and the like. The lion's share of the budget for these teams is personnel related, about 70%. With the remainder made up of contractual services that augment the resource teams that we have. Not a lot of ongoing asks from these teams this year, but there are a handful of one-time expenditures that are before your consideration. The development and engineering side, we've been very hesitant to make any recommendations for ongoing headcount additions because the permitting volume has been somewhat low. That has changed pretty significantly in the last couple of months and something that the team is watching very closely. But for this budget cycle, there's a recommendation for contract employees, fixed-term benefited employees to help augment the existing workforce. There's a very specific line in there for contract building development services. This is really around plan reviews. We were really forecasting the demands of Amcor and what that will bring. And so rather than to overtax the team, they contemplated bringing in some additional resources to augment the teams both in capacity and capability, given the unique nature of that particular facility. And then on-call construction inspection services, a line that's been present as one time for several years and just allows us for rapid support of resourcing. In the planning and community development realm, there are no people-related requests in this particular portion of the budget, but there is a very specific project they'd like to tackle of document scanning, organizing, and recovering. There are about 300 boxes of old plans and documents that we're required to retain. They're wasting space, but more importantly, in today's world with the technology available to us, there's no reason why we should still be dealing with paper. So this project would scan those, categorize those, archive those for future acquisition without having to go through banker's boxes full of things. And the last item here in the development area, there's 2 lines. I'll highlight the second one first, which is the banner replacement program. This is a kind of a 3-department connection. So the banners that you might see at P83 or at Park West are managed through this program, where the Economic Development Services Department has a responsibility really for the content. Comms has responsibility to design, and Public Works has a responsibility to install and maintain. So this ask is a necessary budget because these banners do cost quite a bit of money to handle. Lastly, there is a support program, and Kevin added it here in orange because from what you have in your books, we're proposing a slight change. So it's listed here as an entrepreneurial support program. You may have known it and seen it in your book as ASU Peoria Forward. The ask was for roughly $1.5 million of one-time money over a 3-year period. We would like to alter that and go 1.5 over a 4-year period. But you'll notice here I don't refer to it as ASU Peoria Forward. We've asked the team to really take a look at the entrepreneurial support program. We know it's necessary. Supporting local businesses is a large part of our economic growth. But for us, we see the need to investigate this a little more. Should we do this with internal resources? And if we choose to continue externally, should we do that with ASU as we have in the past, or should we evaluate programs through other academic and university partners? There are other programs out there. We do have a proposal from ASU that we're evaluating, but we have other opportunities to consider. Over the course of the next 90 days, as we work through this budget cycle, we'll make those decisions. But again, we've proposed $1.5 million over a 4-year period to support that entrepreneurial support program. With that, any questions?
Councilor Schaefer.
Thanks, Mayor. Real quick, I apologize. I'm going to go back to municipal court first, and then I got to economic development because I was doing my math. On municipal court, on page 239, the supplement ask is $676,371. And the difference between the supplemental ask and FY24 is $685,165. The difference is $8,794 between the page 239 and page 237 in regards to supplemental ask and the difference between FY24 and the sub. Sorry, I was doing math while we were doing the earlier one. And then my economic development, clarification, I know that we had this discussion earlier, page 217, airport feasibility, $500K. I know that's in the proposed budget for next fiscal year. Current fiscal year, we have $500K. So just to confirm, that's a net new $500K, and we're looking at about $1 million in feasibility study for the airport. Is that correct, Mike?
Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer, yes, it's an additional 500, but it's more than just a feasibility study in that realm. So when we look forward to FY25, yes, there's additional work to look at the airport planning. So it's actually a shift from a feasibility study, the first 4 chapters that are delivered in FY24, to a flash forward to really starting to look at some master planning activities to see what that might look like, right? So you have, is it feasible? And if it's feasible, then what is the next continuation as a multi-year journey to evaluate? Additionally speaking, as we look at the Peoria Innovation Core, a portion of the $500,000 allotted for the supplemental you see for FY25 is really around some land planning. So you've heard us talk about 500 acres. Well, where would it go? What would it look like? Where would the flag post be for the corners? How will you address the storm drainage, and where would you locate? And it's more than just an airport. It's an air park dealing with commercial adjacent use and an airport or a tech park. And so with that, it's a broader look. So yes, it's 500,000 of additional dollars, but to say it's the same or a replication of the feasibility study, in all reality, it's a continuation of the work necessary to stand up an economic engine within the city, whether that is an airport, an air park, or a tech park, as part of the overall land play in the area.
Thanks, Mike.
Good.
Mayor, Councilmember Schaefer, would you like me to answer the question about the municipal court?
Yes, please.
So I believe that it's because in the FY24 base, there was some one-time funding, and that was removed, and that would explain why the supplemental total doesn't match the delta between FY24 and FY25. Does that make sense?
Expand a little bit on that.
So it's basically in 24, there was some funding, and this is likely, we'll follow up with you with what exactly it was.
Time out. You're talking about the $8,000 difference?
Yes, sir.
On a $950 million budget. Let's move on to the next topic. Okay, thank you.
All right, the next category of departments is operations, and I will be taking those, starting with, well, these include, from an operations standpoint, arts, culture, and library services, neighborhood and human services, parks and recreation, public works, and water services. Water services might be a little bit of a misnomer. It also includes wastewater services in there as well. Okay, so from an arts, culture, and library services, you've got about 36 folks and just short of $9 million. Is funded through the general fund, user fees, and a significant portion comes from the percent for the arts fund. And we'll talk about that in one of the projects here in just a moment. Again, about half of it is personnel, half of it's contractuals. Contractuals is really how we get the job accomplished, whether we're working with vendors for events or vendors for some of our other art activities. In terms of the actual budget, we have $119,000 for a fixed-term benefited position that really the arts and culture coordinator coordinates our events across the organization. We also have some part-time non-benefited library and event staffing elements, and you're going to see this in the next three departments. With Proposition 206, there's a minimum wage component, and a lot of our part-time folks bump up against that, and so every year we're having to make some adjustments to that in our budget. So this is the first, and you'll see a couple more ahead of it. The library automation software is software that already exists. This is maintaining those, maintaining that on a support basis. And then the special events, one of the things you may or may not recognize about how we do special events is we come every year and ask for the budget for special events. So that is a year-to-year proposition, but it includes all the typical events of 4th of July, SOMOS. It also has Park Fest in there. So all of our events are combined in that number there. And the last one, the public arts and arts programming, arts and events grants. One of the changes that you see this year is that we're doing grants both for arts and events in that $478,000. And again, most of that money is coming from the percent from the arts fee. Moving on to neighborhood and human services. This is a department of about 55 people and a budget of $17 million. Funded through general fund, user fees, and a significant portion comes from federal and state grants. These folks do some amazing work in finding revenues from federal and state programs that can help support this overall program. Now, out of these 6 bullets, 5 of them are really maintenance of service level. One of them is really the expansion, and I won't make you guess which one. We'll walk through it. The mandatory part-time non-benefited wage increase, that's the one I just referenced with Proposition 206. The increased staff hours, this is really associated with some of the demand that we are seeing for our program. So this is just keeping the same level of service but accommodating additional demand in them. The AM/PM program is right in that same context of increased demand and increased wage costs. The adaptive sensory trailer, this is our new program. The program has been incredibly well. If you look at the second picture on the screen there, the lower one, this is the inside of a sensory trailer that's being requested. So we've been providing sensory rooms at events at the sports complex to better serve those with autism or PTSD during loud events, 4th of July in particular. The trailer takes this sensory safe place and makes it mobile. So now we're able to bring it to any of our events when they have these, so whether it's Park Fest, movies in the parks, community center or events on the plaza, we have this resource then that becomes available to our population. The last two items are really about continuing our service for homeless, and we've got the contract with other providers, as well as the abandoned property cleanup and storage. A lot of times when we're going through some of the trails along the washes and aquifers, we find abandoned camps and need to clean those up, and this is the resources to take care of that. Moving on to Parks and Recreation, getting into a bigger department. We're now up to about 90 employees and $30 million. Certainly, general fund plays a big part of this. The sports complex is an enterprise fund, so they're self-funding a good chunk of what they do, and certainly user fees come into play in this department. If you look, again, this is the third of the three that I talked about. The part-time non-benefited wage increase plays out in this department as well. The next three items are really about the inflation, and Peter Christensen noted that inflation accounted for about $7 million of new money, and this is exactly where you're seeing some of that. Commodity inflation on some of the materials we use in the parks and in the sports complex, utility rates, certainly water rates have gone up, electricity rates have gone up. Those are, the Parks and Recreation are big consumers of both. Right-of-way contracts, Parks and Recreation is actually the ones responsible for maintaining weeds and trees in all of our right-of-ways. That's through a contract, and certainly we're seeing inflation associated with that. From a new service level, the Aquatics Lifeguard and Participation Program, this is kind of an exciting addition. It's really upping our game, where we are achieving Star Guard certification. This is a certification for a lifeguard. As such, it requires some more lifeguards on the pool deck at the same time. It also requires some particular training that we make sure that they all have and are getting on a regular basis. So for $48,000, this covers 3 pools and keeps our children safe through the summer as we're participating in those pool activities. The next two are, again, about taking care of our assets. We have some extensive fencing and canopy replacements. That number looks a little big, and it's not just fencing. We have some other big projects in there. Of particular note, $200,000 goes to the locker room refurbishment. So if you go to the sports complex, you know the Mariners have a clubhouse, the Padres have a clubhouse, but there's actually a third locker room that is for visiting teams, it's for referees, it's for other events that go on in the sports complex that don't use those two, and it's kind of at its end of life. And so there's about $200,000 to refresh that facility to make sure it's adequate for all of our other guests that go through there. And the last one, this is my favorite one, the autonomous athletic field painter. Can you believe we're at this level of technology? So literally they set it up, put this painter down on the field, program it, send it out, and it paints the lines for the field. No humans needed. So anyways, I was excited about that one, so that's it.
Clearly.
Clearly.
Nobody noticed that at all.
All right, Public Works. So this is probably our largest non-public safety department at 185 employees and about $76 million. This department encompasses a number of our enterprise funds, particularly when you talk about solid waste, and then we've got some internal service funds with facilities in here as well, and some of our fleet activities. But it's funded through HERF, that's the Highway User Revenue Fund, that is your gas tax. User fees and the transportation sales tax are all contributors to this department. 4 new positions in the Public Works Department. One is a solid waste operational coordinator. This is actually a position that we've been trying to accomplish with our leads, but it really is just not working out because our leads are really needed in the field, and particularly when we have any vacancies or somebody calling in sick, the leads need to be out in the field. But this person is watching the software. Literally, our software is kind of a command center where they can see where every garbage truck is out on the street, what's going on, if somebody misses a part of the route, or if somebody calls in sick or has a vehicle malfunction, they're able to, in that command center, redirect another driver to go pick up the rest of their route. So it's an important day-to-day activity that we're looking to staff on a full-time basis. Automotive tech, this is, again, another mechanic for our fleet. Our fleet has grown by 53 vehicles in the last 2.5 years. Just that ratio of mechanics to vehicles is an important part of that. The Transportation Tech 1 is related to our street sign shop. We have not increased the staffing in this area for about 10 years. But in that 10-year time period, Peoria has grown by 36,000 people, and our signs have grown by 30%. So you don't really think about it, but there's a lot of traffic control signs out there, and by federal laws, we're required to replace them and keep them up to standards so that our traveling public stays protected. The videos for solid waste vehicles, this is really just taking our operation to the next level. We've had the ability to take photos. This actually puts a video recorder on it, so particularly when we have any sort of accidents, we now have a record of what happened and can really, in many cases, exonerate the driver and be more clear in our risk management claims. And I'll just jump to the last one, microtransit pilot program. When we decommissioned POGO, we've set aside some dollars for a possible microtransit pilot program that come out of those same transit funds. And this is going to be more of a research and proposition type project over the next year that we will come back to once and if we think we've got something that makes sense for our community. All right, last department under operations is water services. Another large department of 113 FTEs and about $58.5 million. This is funded through user rates. It is an enterprise fund, and so all expenses have to be covered through the rates that it charges. Now, the interesting part is if you look at that pie graph, you can see only 24% is personnel, the rest is contractual. That just speaks to what an important part that this department plays in, or having partners in relations to getting this job done. So a couple of items of note, we have 3 new positions. One is the engineering supervisor. We discussed earlier in the CIP, we have a lot of capital projects moving through. The engineering supervisor is helping move those through from a design, working with developers, working with new projects that come online, working with engineers to manage those projects and keep them moving. We then add 2 other plant operators on our water reclamation side of the equation. Again, as we're taking in more wastewater, we need more folks to process that and get it back out in the form of reclaimed water. Certification pay program revamp. This is really a staff retention program. Certified operators of water and wastewater plants are in high demand and they are very hard to get. And so by offering, when they achieve their certifications, automatic bumps in pay is a way to not only incentivize our employees to get higher certifications and better training, but it retains them immediately to say, I'm making more money when I do that, when I contribute that qualification to the organization. Again, a lot of inflationary costs associated with our operations, the continuation of a couple contract employees, and then the last one I want to spend just one extra slide on, which is the water delivery fee. The cost of raw water is not getting any cheaper, particularly as we see water demands go up, the amount of Colorado River water decrease. We are seeing a $2.3 million increase from CAP to buy the same water that we've been buying for years. So that takes us from 7.8 to 10.1. A lot of that is due to inflation on energy costs, their OM and replacement, but there was also, with all this inflation that everybody was experiencing, the CAP and its partners had a rate stabilization fund that could kind of offset when you had spikes in expenses. Unfortunately, we've exhausted that. The spike is no longer just a spike, it's a new reality, and so that fund has been exhausted and the costs are being passed along. However, the great part about this is there is a federal program where if we leave some of our water, which we're leaving about 20% of our water behind the Hoover Dam at Lake Mead, they will pay us for that. And so at about $400 an acre foot, we're getting almost $2.9 million back by leaving just 20% of it behind the dam. So while we're seeing a pretty significant increase, this program is kind of a double win. We see more water and the level of Lake Mead rise, and we're making all that money back that we can then use to buy underground storage credits or long-term storage credits. So a lot of good stuff going on in the water services budget. And with that, I'm open to any questions.
Councilor Finn.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 statements and a couple of questions. One is I ask about the commodities, the increases in the commodities. You guys sent me a great answer to that, so my statement is thank you for that. It was a very cogent response to the commodity increases and where they came from. If any other council members would like that, I'd be happy to send it to y'all. The second statement is Clemson 29, Cats 20. And my questions, are, the Auto Tech 2, you had up there for $325,000, and I believe $225,000 of that is one-time cost.
Oh,
Yeah, is that tools and? Truck?
yeah, that's the, right.
Gotcha, okay, thank you for that clarification. I was gonna say, you're gonna have a lot of people applying for that job. Including me.
Yeah, right.
So,
Fair enough, fair enough.
and then my other question is from page, I should have asked this in advance, I apologize, I did not. But on page 453 on Streets Transit Equipment Reserve, it shows $2.4 million in the 2025 budget, and previous years were like considerably less than that. I'm just curious what that increase is. So again, page 453, under the Public Works operating budget, about halfway down, Streets Transit Equipment Reserve. Ah, look at them coming from the back row.
I'm not looking at the paper, but I think I can explain it.
Okay.
And Don, you can yell at me if I get this wrong.
I want to see that.
That fund is where we set aside money to replace vehicles, right? So every year, we're transferring money over there to pay for future replacement of vehicles. What's happening in the auto industry the last few years is we order vehicles and it takes 2 years to get them, right? So a lot of that is just carryover from the last year, is that right, Don?
Yes, and larger vehicles as well.
So we have some of our regular replacements that we're doing, but we're also carrying over money from last year because we didn't actually get the vehicles that we wanted to get.
Okay, makes sense, thank you.
Yep.
That's all I got.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. With that, we're going to do a little shift change, and we'll bring up the public
good.
safety crew for the next one. I think Chief Bernard calls this a line change in hockey.
Well, if you were talking about hockey, that's exactly what you'd be talking about, right?
I think the Chiefs were waiting for theme music to come down, but never happened. I put on the glasses to complete the Kevin Burke lookalike here. And
You can hardly tell the difference.
Yeah.
And Kevin's not the only one that is excited about the autonomous field painter. I'm excited also. Travis Cutright, Deputy City Manager over Public Safety, joined by our Police Chief and Fire Chief. And who's got the clicker? Did you take that, Kevin? Oh, geez. We're starting off bad. And so first we're going to touch on the police department. And so the police department's the largest department we have here, and total staffing is 364 that's proposed in this budget. Currently we have, we're staffed at 234 sworn and 112 non-sworn staff with a budget of almost $90 million. And so the police department's funded through general fund, grants, and forfeiture funds, as well as the half-cent sales tax. So the lion's share of the budget would be a personnel cost, and then we've got some capital outlay, 5%, contractual 17%, and then the commodities is the remaining 7%. In this budget that's before you, there are requests for several positions, and the first is the technical support staff. So with all departments, but especially with public safety, the reliance on technology is just increasing. And so as such, we need staff that's able to support the technology that's deployed and that will continue to be deployed. And so that's what's driving this, this ask for the technical support staff. Police hiring specialists, as large as this department is and as much recruiting as we have going on, we've got one person that handles all of that, and it is a bottleneck for the department. And so we're trying to relieve some of that bottleneck by adding an additional personnel to help with the hiring. Also included in this budget that's before you is 5 police officers, a crime analyst, and then 3 SLOs. One of those, I believe, is a sergeant, asked for a sergeant, and then 3 records unit staff. Now, in past years, we've had a lot of asks for sworn and not many asks for non-sworn, and so this, I'm going to take this opportunity to just point out that the non-sworn is necessary to support the sworn, and so I'm talking about dispatch staff, I'm talking about the records staff and the technology staff. All of those need to, we've got to, as we increase sworn, we have to think about increasing non-sworn support staff so that they're able to do their jobs and stay safe out on the streets. An innovative approach to our investigations, the chief came forward with a pilot program that he wants to bring on, do a 3-year project of 4 civilian investigative specialists. So if this works out, it saves the city a ton of money, because now we've got civilians that can go in and assist the detectives with the investigative work and it saves us on the pension side, it saves us on the salary side, it frees up the detectives, the sworns to be more effective. And so I'm doing a lot of talking, but I'm going to have the chiefs chime in here also. But the civilian investigative specialist, that's for, oh, sure, go ahead.
So the idea behind the civilian investigative specialist is by employing civilian employees that are trained in the investigative techniques of interviewing, report writing, evidence collection, documentation through photographs, and being able to put together a solid investigative report. This would occur on low-risk, high-frequency types of events such as vehicle burglaries, residential burglaries, identity theft, credit card fraud, the types of calls that are typically what we call delayed calls. There are 3 to 4 hours typically before a patrol officer is going to get to them, just because of the unlikelihood of any suspect contact or a delay in the reporting itself, because somebody comes out to their car, their vehicle's been broken into, they don't know when it's occurred. So by training civilians to do this job in this regard, from a safety standpoint, there's low to no risk of any suspect contact, so we don't have to worry about the need for an armed employee trained with defensive tactics and all the equipment as such that an officer would typically get. The success that I've seen in this model has been tremendous. Productivity with the low-level crimes, which is typically not the type of stuff an officer wants to go out and respond to. So the motivation isn't always that great for those types of calls. The civilians that are interested because they love to watch NCIS and they get into this trust me, I quoted somebody, but they loved NCIS and they wanted to try it out, and we had so many people apply for it. The success was tremendous in terms of productivity. The performance measures exceeded our expectations. The quality of report, the customer service, et cetera, was phenomenal. So,
thank you, Chief. You can see he's passionate about this, and the cool thing about both of our chiefs here, they're both innovative in how to solve, innovative thinking and how to solve problems, and I know I really appreciate that, and I'm sure you all do as well. So $103,000 is budgeted for cost escalation as we deploy new officers. We have to purchase radio equipment to support them, and so that's the $168,000, not $168. for the radio equipment, and then patrol vehicle armor. So when Chief Entrieri came in, he was inquiring about armor in the doors of our police vehicles, and that's what this line item is without going into detail, more detail.
Can I pause for a second?
Yes.
That's not mine. Just so everybody realizes that's watching, I'm not providing armor to for that. So I'm not selling armor for the vehicles. I just want to make sure that they realize that that's not me, just so the public knows.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great. So we're going to move over to fire medical, and then we'll open it up for questions. So fire and medical, we're staffed at, this budget calls for a 261 FTE profile. The total budget is 55 million, and fire is funded through general fund and user fees. So 84% of the budget is personnel-related costs. You got 12% contractual, and then 4% commodities. So DCM Faust touched on Fire Station 198 earlier, and so we're asking for 15 FTEs to help staff that station. So why now? Station's not built. It takes approximately 2 years of ramp-up time to get the firefighters to where they are able to go out and run. So so this is the appropriate time to start ramping up. Asking for 2 additional FTEs to upgrade from low acuity unit to medical response unit, and I'm going to have Chief Bernard speak on both of these if you'd like.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Cutright. Mayor, Council, this is a big deal for us to staff this stuff early, get ahead of the game. We've been catching up, so this will allow the 15 FTEs to get trained, go through the academy, and when they get out, we can send people to paramedic school. Paramedic school is 9 months long, and those folks are off the truck, so we don't lose staffing there. We also have training in technical rescue and hazmat, which is 200 hours long, and then we have some additional rescue swimmer training. So this allows us to really get people up to training without having to backfill them and increase our overtime, so it's a really big deal. The LA unit was out of Station 192 on Union Hills and 89th Avenue. It's a 2-person vehicle with a paramedic and a EMT, both firefighters. The initial thought when we put this in service about 8 years ago was that it would decrease the call volume for Engine 192, which was really high at the time. What it ended up doing was allowing Engine 192 to run the same amount of calls, but in their own area. So they're available more often to respond to calls in their area. The issue with the LA unit is when they go out, their low acuity calls, a fall injury, a cut finger, stuff like that. If that call needs a paramedic evaluation, they need to call another fire engine. So we'd have to call that fire engine back out. A lot of times it was a Sun City fire engine coming, and the model just wasn't working too well. So if we upgraded to the MR unit, now we have a 4-person crew with a captain, an engineer, just like the other trucks, 2 paramedics, and they can take the call from beginning to end and not have to special call another unit. The other good thing about the MR unit is it's geofenced in the city of Peoria, so it won't go across borders unless there's one of 5 nature codes, like a drowning, pediatric code, a police shooting, stuff like that. The very extreme calls, we would go help on those cases, but other than that, it would stay in Peoria and respond to Peoria citizens, so it's a really good model for us.
Thank you, Chief. And so we're part of an automatic aid system, and so the city of Phoenix actually dispatches for the system, and so their fees are increasing, and so they're pushing it off onto the participating members, and so our portion would be an increase of $35,000. Our grip sticks, so Glendale Regional Public Safety Training Center, we're a member there, and as such, we're required to pay fees, and so those fees are increasing also by $60,000. And then we're asking for another $185,000 to go toward paramedic training And then inflationary increases with regards to medical supply, diesel for the apparatus, apparel, building maintenance, and vehicle maintenance is around $360,000 adds in this budget. I'm sure you have questions for the chiefs, and so we'll open it up.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Thanks, Mayor. Chiefs, great presentation. Travis, I like the bow tie.
Thank you.
Travis, page 401, the top it says Real-Time Crime Center. In the description, it talks about the Real-Time Crime Center, but in the line item, it says wearing apparel, safety vests. Is that a cleanup? I just want to confirm that it's Real-Time Crime Center, not safety vests. On page 401.
So, yeah, it's a real-time crime.
So, okay, Real-Time Crime Center, and then actually,
Yeah, that was I think it's gonna be a typo in this, item.
Okay.
We'll clean it up.
and actually one more cleanup, thank you for cleaning that up. Page 426, Special Operations Equipment, a total cost $50,300. In the line items above, there's 3, air cards, TrueNAC, and street crimes. Down below, in the descriptions, it talks about those in addition to facial recognition software and deep cycle batteries, and I don't see those as a dollar amount above. On page 426.
We do have Heather back there if we need to bring her up, so if we need to phone a friend, so.
Heather, do you have those amounts? Yeah.
We're phoning a friend.
Okay, thank you.
And it breaks out. Okay, the description was not removed, but those items had been cut.
Great.
So the dollar amounts don't reflect those items.
Thank you, Chief. So just to confirm, facial recognition software and deep cycle batteries will be removed, is that correct?
Correct.
Great, thank you for verifying, Chief. And then lastly, Travis, on page 439, this is the aviation unit. I see the 3.5 million in there, and I know that we received the grant for the 3.5. I thought we had already spent that. Is that additional, is that a net new 3.5? And then for the FY '25 budget, is the operations of the air unit only 400,000 for maintenance of fuel, and what about staffing?
So the helicopter has been ordered and the grant, not grant fund, the funding from the state was used to purchase the helicopter. And it's scheduled to show up on July 31st or before. I'm not sure why the 3.5 is in there. I'm looking back to Peter. I'm looking at Kevin, but maybe a question to Peter.
The maintenance.
I think what happened, and we can follow up on this later, but we had the 3.5 million city funds last year that was approved as part of the budget process. Subsequently, got the $3.5 million in state funding for the helicopter. We used the state funding for the purchase of the helicopter. But we also recognized that we had some costs, and step in if I'm wrong, speaking out of turn here, to get the hangar ready, to buy equipment to do the maintenance on the helicopter, and a bunch of other things. So at the end of the day, there's going to be some money left over of that original $3.5 million from last year that we carried over, and we'll have to make a determination about what we're going to do with that. Is that right?
No, thank you, Peter. It'd be
And you were asking about staffing?
staffing, total operation costs, because I look at this and I see 400,000 for next fiscal year budget.
Well, this is an additional ask. So the operating cost for the aviation unit was budgeted and is actually in the current budget at $1 million. And it's in the next budget for $1 million. That's already baked in. This is additional. What we're talking about today is additional to what's already in the budget.
Thank you, Travis. So you're saying 1.4 million will be in the budget for operations of the aviation unit? Because if $1 million's baked in, there's a 400,000 supplemental. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Patina.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Mr. Cartwright, I thought I heard you say that if you hire civilian investigative specialists, it'd be significant savings to the city, correct?
Yes, sir.
As opposed to a sworn officer in that position?
Yes.
Why is that?
So we have to, for every sworn, we have to contribute to their, to the public safety retirement system, which is a substantial cost to the city over, as compared to the ASRS system. And so the civilians would be in the Arizona State retirement system and not the public safety retirement system. And so.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Any other questions, though? Okay. I have a couple questions for both. This is a question for both chiefs. What challenges do you guys see ahead? And I'd like to start with fire, since you're on the left here, or at least my left. What challenges do you see ahead of your department and from a response time, personnel, and equipment needs?
Great question.
That's not in this budget. Let me preface that.
No, we're really happy with the budget and where we're going, the direction we're going. The challenges, like everybody, is the growth, keeping up with that growth, especially up north. A challenge for us is the response times and the call volume that seems to be increasing every year. We're running some numbers, and it seems over 10 years, the population growth compared to the call volume, we run about 130 additional calls for every 1,000 people that come into the city. So we're looking at those numbers. We're working with the Department of Innovation, Scott's group over there, looking at response times. We're doing visits at the alarm rooms and looking at call processing time and moving through that process, which has been very educational for us and hopefully for them too, so they understand the work of the fire department. We've been working with Ed Striffler's team for the new station, very excited about having that station come up online, so that's going to help a bunch. I think looking at future stations as growth comes in is going to be an important aspect for us. We're looking at maybe some infill trucks or stations. That way, possibly that's a solution to decrease response times and decrease the call volume for our firefighters out there. But just an exciting time for us, a lot going on. We appreciate all your guys' support and the leadership from city leadership. We'll continue working with them and look for opportunities to get better and continue to improve, but thank you very much.
So, yeah, appreciate that. What is your, I'm going to ask the same question. Travis disappeared, so hopefully he's catching this. I'm going to ask the same question when it comes to police as well, but this next part. What is your average per 1,000 citizens? Like, what is it, you know, what across, like, is there a standard when it comes to how many firefighters per 1,000 citizens? That, is there like, you know, inside the National Firefighting Code?
Yeah, I wish there was, because that'd be easier to quantify, but there's no National Fire Protection, NFPA, there's no standard on number, but there is some studies out there from NFPA. They've got a couple. They did one in 2020, and the average was 1.54 to 1.8 firefighters per 1,000. There's another study that says in the Southwest it should be 1 firefighter per 1,000. Currently, we're at 0.84 firefighters per 1,000. But you have to understand, we're not counting the transportation part of our business. Does that make sense? We have 205 firefighters, captain down, but we remove 41 of those firefighters because they're not the primary responders to the call. That's a transportation piece of what we do. The fire engine goes, they do treatment, the 4 firefighters on the engine, and if they need transportation, they call the rescue. And the benefit of having sworn firefighters on the rescue is that they're interchangeable. They can work the rescue, then they can work the engine. We don't have turnover like they do in the civilian world. There's some models that the fire department has civilian staff on the rescues, and the turnover is crazy because most of them are getting on there so they get hired on the fire department. So that's really good. And then it helps with our ISO rating, Insurance Services Organization. They carry their turnouts on the rescue, so when a fire goes out and they respond, that's part of the response model to get 15 firefighters on scene within 8 minutes, 10 minutes, meets that standard, and that gives us a higher ISO rating, which we're an ISO rating of 1 in Peoria, which is the highest you can get. So part of that is because of that. The other part is the great job the water department's doing. That's part of the ISO rating also, is the water system that we have. So all that comes together. So those are kind of what we're doing out there. I think we're moving in the right direction, like I said, and I'm really excited where we're going with all this stuff.
Thank you. Chief? So kind of, I'll start off with a similar question. You know, is the standard, I believe, is like 1.3, 1.3 something, you know, 1.31, 1.32 across the nation. What is the, you know, where are we at right now in the city of Peoria?
Mayor, council.
And where would you like it to be?
Well, so there are those ratios that are talked about across the nation, and the policing or law enforcement, it's almost like when we use the term higher education, it's really a misnomer, institution to institution. We talk about region to region. Things are very different here in Arizona versus east of the Mississippi in terms of how we do business. We talk about our civilian employees or professional staff. On the East Coast, they typically are filled with sworn positions. Records clerks, dispatchers are sworn members. So there's obviously a much higher ratio in some parts of the country than here. My assessment, my analysis, and looking at all the West Valley agencies are really 10 out of the 12 largest municipalities here in the valley. By taking Phoenix and Mesa out of the equation, the ratio on average is about 1.41. Mesa and Phoenix throws that way off because they have a much higher ratio. But I feel comfortable with the 1.41 ratio. We are at 1.17 right now. And so that's kind of where we're at. So we're in a.
Kevin might have had a small heart attack over there.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt it.
It's okay. We have medical on
Sure,
site,
whatever.
so we're good. So, thank you for the additional SROs, you know, this year. I know, you know, we talked to a lot of families. We've talked about this up here a number of times. You know, that is a huge push. Obviously, we want to continue that every year and make sure that we see our schools and our children. They are our future, so we want to see our schools continue to be safe in that. To see the new 15 firefighters come on, I think it's incredible, you know, and also that was 17 total, but the new station being up and running, it's going to be great to see these guys get trained. So, and love the, I think everybody would probably have the same sentiment. We love the concept of having civilian investigators in that and really trying to put more patrol people on the street and actually utilize those civilians to do that. So, any other questions at all? No?
Mayor, if you would, Councilmember Schaefer, I'd like to do a go back to the to address the 3.5 million, just to try to clarify. I think I know I was confusing when I was speaking. So the $3.5 million was budgeted to purchase the helicopter. Mayor was successful in getting us $3.5 million from the state to purchase a helicopter, and so that's what purchased the helicopter. This is a carryover, the 3.5 that was originally budgeted that we did not use because we got state money. And so we're requesting to carry this over into this next fiscal year to use for equipment and tooling, training, whatever we might need to get this aviation unit stood up. That's the request, is to carry this over. So this is not a new ask, but this is an existing item that we're asking to carry over.
Okay, so just clarifying that, Travis, thank you so much. So the 3.5 is carryover. The helicopter has been purchased with the state funds.
Yes.
And so for this fiscal year, 3.9 million for the first year to operate. And is it 4.9? Because I thought there was already 1 million budgeted. Is that correct?
There's $1 million in the budget.
Okay.
That was budgeted in this year that we're in. Yes. And so this is intended to build out the aviation unit. This is a huge program. It's not you buy a helicopter and you land it, you know, out on the grass somewhere. I mean, there's training that goes into, there's equipment to move the helicopter from the tarmac into the hangar. We've got to build out office space, for staff that's more than the aviation staff that's going to be out at the hangar. And so, this carryover is intended to, stand up the aviation unit.
Okay, so
It's
program
not ongoing,
cost.
it's not, we don't anticipate an ongoing cost of $3.5 million.
So let's preface. So you're not buying a second helicopter, correct?
I'm not buying
I just want to preface that so people understand that, and Councilmember Schaefer understands that. You have $1 million that's in the operational cost of the helicopter itself.
Yes.
Correct? And this is the carryover of the $3.5 million that this council approved last year that is being carried over to be utilized for possibly the aviation unit and other areas inside law enforcement and fire throughout this. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. Next presentation. Thank you, gentlemen.
So Mayor, that is our last presentation, and on that last point, we will between now and May 9th, when we would come back with our proposed budget, we will put a finer point on the point that you just made about making sure it's clear how we're going to be spending that carryover from fiscal year '24. We'll provide a little more detail about how that's going to be used. We'll work on that, and we'll share that with council before the next meeting, so you're aware. And we'll do the same thing. I mean, we won't go through the adds and deletes here at the end of this afternoon's discussion, but we will take back what was already on the list, the things that have been added to the list since we've been here. We as staff will go back, take a look at that. We will work with the individual members who have brought this to our attention, the members of council who have brought this to our attention, and we'll work with that member on making adjustments to the budget or bringing it before council on May 7th. I said May 9th, it's May 7th. So we will be back, of course, for a more formal presentation for your consideration and your vote, and we'll work with members between now and then to make some clarifications, but also to address these issues that have been discussed today. But before we close, and Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you for our final closing. I just wanted to acknowledge the other conversation we were just having about some of the needs in our public safety efforts here within the city. And the fact is that both police and fire have made requests. They're in the throes of doing additional evaluation of our needs, and we will be back this upcoming year in a study session to talk about what those needs are and how we might fund those needs going forward, and how we might need your support from council to support those needs. We, as you heard from both chiefs and from Travis, they're comfortable with where we are. I'm comfortable with where we are for our proposal for fiscal year '25. But we want to talk in more detail as we start preparing, and before we start preparing the fiscal year '26 budget, to give you a better idea of where we think we are versus where we want to be on public safety for the city. You know, we started that conversation today, and I think it's a very important conversation. We'll be back in a study session, so long as the mayor agrees to put that on agenda to discuss that as well. But I want to talk a little bit about the process, give some thanks before we close. So this was the first time in my experience here where we had all of the deputy city managers all of the deputy city managers in our Office of Innovation sit with each team of directors as we were talking about this year's budget. And during the course of those discussions, we identified a number of opportunities for us to become more efficient and possibly save money for the city. And we will, over the course of the next year, work on ways we could become more efficient and save money or add revenue to our budget. But I also, so the DCMs were an integral part of this. All of our department heads spent time, a lot of time and effort over the past 6 months or so putting together this budget, and I want to thank them for their contribution in doing so. But I also want to talk about and thank our budget team, because they really did the lion's share of the actual work in getting this budget document together. And I mean, this is, I mean, I'll hold it up. I mean, this is a, you can see it on their tables there. This is a monumental undertaking to put this together every year. So I want to thank Sean Kindle, Peter Christensen, Ben Butler, Don Jenkins, and Brett Thomas for their work in putting this together. This represents a lot of effort, and I know council appreciates that effort as well. But like I said, Mayor and Council, we'll take the feedback we've gotten today. We'll incorporate that into the final recommendation that we'll be making to you when our tentative budget and our CIP for your consideration of potential adoption on May 7th. With that, Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you for final remarks.
All right, thank you. I would actually echo those remarks of the city manager. A couple things I want to point out. Over the next 10 years, $736 million spent on water infrastructure, going through that process. You look at between water and wastewater, $314 million in water, $422 million in wastewater. That is no small undertaking. That is absolutely amazing. I had dinner last night, and we were at the West Valley Mayor's dinner, and we all, you're going to think this is crazy, but we're sitting there all talking about our wastewater and water budgets. And it's just interesting to see people are literally blown away on how much effort we're actually putting into our future. You know, we talked about this 15 months ago now, 14 months ago. You know, the three pillars of this aspect, you know, you talk about the kind of the three pillars of the city and city government, and I classify it as the three pillars of what our future is, so we can actually realize, you know, what our potential is. And people think that that's a tagline, but I literally do think that we actually live with that. You know, what is our future? How do we actually have a vision for that? How do we execute that? And I realize that not everybody sees that same vision, and that's okay. The reality is that's the vision that we're following. That's the vision that we're chasing. And I've seen from both the scorecard system and the Office of Innovation and the groups that you guys have gotten into as managers and directors in the city and really gotten behind that, and that is what absolutely drives that vision forward. We are 7 people up here that try to drive that vision. You all and the rest of the employees in the city are the ones that actually execute on that. And I would say that we can't be prouder as a group up here to see the drive and execution that you guys have put in to do that. So it is very, very appreciative on our part. Look at my glasses here, and I realize I've got 5 minutes, so. Roads and infrastructure, over the next 10 years, $261 million. Traffic controls alone, $38 million. Those are all pieces that keep us safe. We talk about SROs, we talk about firehouses, we talk about patrol officers and investigators. A lot of times, you know, we don't necessarily talk about wastewater and solid waste drivers and solid waste equipment and all those other types of things. That is what makes our city function. It is all of this as a conglomerate that allows us to be able to do all this. So I want to make sure that we point that out. Sometimes people don't think about how significant traffic controls are. One of the things that Mr. Faust pointed out earlier was that we had it was last Wednesday, right? We had a little girl on Jomax that was tragically hit. And, you know, imagine yourselves as being a parent and trying to figure that out. Imagine the young lady that actually, unfortunately, hit her. You know, what can we do? Safety and well-being of our citizens is our first charter. And that is every aspect, from clean water to wastewater to traffic controls to potholes to you name it. And I personally see the efforts that this group puts together. And I've tried to share that as much as I can, so I hope if I haven't shared that with you, it is very, very appreciated. And I think that anybody up here would say that, those same sentiments. So even the guy that's running this PowerPoint, so very appreciated. These lights could go a little down, but that's okay. It's part of my, I've had, you know, just saying, I had like worry about my shine up here a little bit, right? We will, I will tell you this to staff, we will we have homework to do as well. Our job is to make sure that we ask these questions, some of these little minute questions, everything from small budgeting pieces to typos and those types of things. We should be having those conversations with you beforehand. And we will make sure that that occurs before the next meeting, I promise you, okay? Thank you for all your efforts. Thank you for building a great city and keeping our citizens safe and everything you guys do. With that, we are adjourned.